What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing the 35th episode of Godzilla-Thon. That's right, Godzilla-Thon is back from the dead, back out of retirement. Actually, this series will never end, because anytime they make a new Godzilla movie, I'll be here to review it. So today, we are gonna do my spoiler review. You guys have all been asking for it. I've been excited to do it. My spoiler review for Godzilla, Planet of the Monsters. Or, I'd like to call it Godzilla Monster Planet, because that's the actual translation. That's just a cooler title. That's just my opinion, but it's right, you know. Alright, so getting into this, actually this is 4 pages worth of notes. The only other review to have 4 pages worth of notes was Shin Godzilla, so I don't know how long this one's gonna be. I'm very excited to start recording Kong-a-thon. I'm actually waiting for a specific piece of equipment before I start recording that, but I'm gonna be getting that equipment soon, and then I'm gonna be recording Kong-a-thon, and I'm very excited for Kong-a-thon, as I know a lot of you guys are. This just feels like a great return to form for me, so I know this has nothing to do with Godzilla Monster Planet, but I don't know, I just feel like it's a really cool thing to finally go back to Godzilla-thon. It's been over a month. I think it's been like 2 months since the last Godzilla-thon. I don't know, I've missed it. I've missed doing the reviews. I've been watching Kongs, I've been taking notes, I've been doing the pictures. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you've seen that I've been posting and teasing some of the art. Same thing with on Facebook. There you go. This one for Godzilla Monster Planet. Let's get right into it. Haruo Sakaki. He's the main character of this movie. He's taken over an escape shuttle on this massive transport ship that has left Earth and is headed to distant planets. He plans to blow himself up in the pod, and the pod will blow up with him, assuming that the mission, which is what the crew is going with, doesn't change. So what the mission is they're planning to leave the elderly on a new planet, and Haruo saying if that plan isn't aborted, he's gonna blow himself up. They're at the planet called Taui. They're there for immigration. Haruo is pissed because the elderly are being dropped off on the planet, and it's not suited for human life. The elderly contact Haruo and warn him that they did want to go on the planet. They volunteered for this. They want to die on land. They know the risk. He's all upset, and so he's just upset, so he gives up. They don't want to die in space. They've been there for 20 years, searching for a new planet, and then they're just done. Haruo surrenders, and he's arrested. The elderly die in the atmosphere on their way to the planet. Their ship blows up, and Haruo's watching from his jail cell. Haruo's grandfather dies on the shuttle as well, so it's pretty emotional for him. He really didn't want to see that happen, but his worst dream came true. Haruo recaps Earth's history in a quick montage. Kaiju appeared, killing everyone, until one day Godzilla showed up. Godzilla killed everything in his path, whether that be kaiju or humanity, and not even thousands of nukes being released at once could stop him. The movie directly references when multiple hundreds of nukes hit Godzilla at once, but in a timeline explained video that we're going to be doing pretty soon, we'll talk about the extended history of the Monster Planet timeline and how they did launch thousands of nukes at Godzilla, and he just kind of walked it off. That raises a big plot hole, and that plot hole I'll maybe discuss in a future video. Just to pose the question to you guys now, can someone explain to me how it's possible for Godzilla to tank 1,000, I think they say actually it's like 20,000 nukes, it's something absolutely ridiculous number, 20,000 nukes, and yet he's killed by a couple robots and some EMPs being deployed inside of his body? I get it, he has that dorsal fin on his back that shoots out this shield that can protect him, he has the whole regeneration thing, and the EMPs in his body disrupt his regeneration, but really, if this Godzilla is powerful enough to regenerate from being hit by 20,000 nukes, if his dorsal fin can regenerate and protect him from the shield, with the shield, and you know, he's just gonna live from that, this Godzilla is by far the strongest Godzilla of all times ever. I don't care that they managed to, spoiler alert, kill him in the movie. I don't care. He's definitely the strongest Godzilla ever. No Godzilla we've ever seen can do that. I don't even think Final Wars, who took a meteor to the face, could do that. So that's insane. They killed this Godzilla, which is absolutely incredible. Good job, humanity. Haruo, your plan shouldn't have worked. The aliens show up. I say the aliens like I've already established that they're aliens. Alright, so aliens show up on the planet. They show up to help humanity, but they fail. The aliens help evacuate Earth. There's also multiple species of aliens. We'll get into that in another video. During evacuation, Godzilla blows up a shuttle, killing Haruo's parents when the shuttle falls down onto these cars and they explode and everyone's dead. Space travel is cold and lonely and dangerous. Lots of humanity die on the travel. Some of them kill themselves, which is a pretty brutal scene when you see a guy shoot himself right in the face and his blood goes all over the wall. That's the only blood we actually see in the movie, which is interesting. Haruo says humanity has no pride or care anymore, and that's one thing that Godzilla took from them. Haruo studies Godzilla in prison and has help from an Exif, that's the alien race, named Mephthes, or as Haruo says, Mephthes. There is about a 0.1% chance of finding a new habitable planet outside of Earth. At least that's in range of this space station. Morale is low, and so the decision is made that Earth is 11.9 light years away, but it's worth a shot trying to get back there. A paper is published suggesting that Godzilla can be killed. The plan to head back to Earth is becoming a popular theory and is becoming a reality. The Gamatron, which I guess is some sort of prediction machine, starts using 80% of its power to run simulations on if a jump to Earth will work. People get excited to head back to Earth. A whole bunch of the humans on the ship have never seen Earth before, and the humans talk of the Gamatron as if it's the Exif's god, which is interesting. I really don't know. Do they worship this machine? I'm not sure. Either way, a plan to use a subspace warp jump to Earth is made. The aliens talk to each other about heading to Earth, and it's about this time that the Gamatron creates some sort of long wormhole that the Earth nations, which is what the spaceship, like the international interspecies community on the spaceship is called, enters the wormhole. They're basically spit out at Earth. Reconnaissance drones probe the Earth. Particles covering the atmosphere interfere with the visibility, however. One drone is shot down by an output of particles, aka the atomic breath. The Earth Union identifies Godzilla is on the surface of the planet. They then debate how to proceed. It turns out that Godzilla hasn't actually had a huge effect on the oxygen of Earth. Even though he's radioactive and leaves radiation everywhere he goes, people can still breathe safely on the planet, according to these drones. And then later on they'll say that they can't, so I don't really know which one to believe. Mephthes releases Haruo from prison. Actually, wait a minute, I'm going to go back. I totally know which one to believe. It's definitely these drones in the air. These drones are telling the truth because later on, if you remember, we see in the post-credit scenes, Haruo is breathing without his mask on, and he's just fine. So, there you go. So, Haruo is released from prison. Mephthes gets him out. Haruo brings the plan to kill Godzilla up to the Earth nations and says that it will work if more data is collected on Godzilla's combat. They need to find some sort of super organ of Godzilla's. 600 people are sent to the surface of the Earth in order to do this. Thermobaric bombs are dropped on the surface to wake up Kong, to clear out a forest for landing, and Haruo has the old Tarasawa Pass trapped, meaning he places traps all over the Tarasawa Pass, so that if Godzilla walks through it, he'll be bombed by these whatever the traps are. I don't think we actually find out what the traps do until the very end, and even then, that's clearly a different plan that they're putting in motion. It's definitely not the same one from the start, because he says, oh, we need to put traps in this place. So, I don't know what the original traps do. Communication to the orbiting spaceship is blocked by some sort of fog bank. You know, because Skull Island has the fog bank, so this movie had a fog bank. I really feel like these guys just watched King Kong and were like, yeah, that's pretty badass, and so they just did it in a Godzilla movie, which totally true. Kong Skull Island's a badass movie, but there is a lot of parallels to Kong Skull Island in this movie. And I'm not just talking like King Kong in general, I'm specifically talking Kong Skull Island. And you guys can see I made a whole video like parodying that fact, the Kong Skull Island trailer, or Godzilla Monster Planet Kong Skull Island style. Anyways, Haruo is planning to investigate the terrain, although he can't be let off because he committed the crimes at the beginning of the movie, so they kind of have him in handcuffs. I can't speak, apparently. They have him in handcuffs, and his fangirl Yuko is put in charge of him. She actually doesn't fangirl out about him too much, however. She's clearly obsessed with him. She calls him senpai, all this weird stuff, even though they never met, so she clearly has a deep respect for this guy. And I like how in the subtitles on Netflix, which absolutely suck, by the way, I actually have only seen the English cut of this movie once, but I've seen the Japanese cut a number of times. The subtitles are terrible. Sometimes they don't show up at all. Sometimes they show up really late and then are off screen way too quickly before you get to read them. And in cases like this, they're blatantly translating wrong. She clearly says senpai, and I know they don't really have a word for that in English, although I guess you could be like mister, you could have her say mister, but it's funny because they just always change it to Haruo, so she's always calling his name. It's like, that's not what she's saying. I can understand his name. That's not, even though it's in Japanese, that's not something that we change for English. Anyways, some of the plants have become super strong to the point where you can shoot them with these, what is that, like some sort of torch, some sort of welding torch, and they won't even break. It's mentioned that it could be deadly to expose yourself to the fog in the air. That's not actually what they say. They just said, hey, be careful, if you poke a hole in your spacesuit, you're gonna die. But it's like, I don't understand why you would, because clearly earlier the reconnaissance drone said, no, yeah, you can breathe on this planet without your helmets. And then later on, we definitely see humans doing that, so I don't know why they're so worried about it. I guess they just don't want to take that risk. However, I just assumed it was due to the fog in the air. Yuko asks if the elderly were killed by the bombs that Haruo placed on the shuttle, which is a super dark thing to think about. The bombs that Haruo rigs up on the shuttle to blow himself up with at the start of the movie, if then this command decided to blow up the elderly upon entry into orbit with those same bombs, that's really messed up. I don't understand why they would. Haruo doesn't either. He says he has to stay optimistic and he'd rather not think about it. But I don't understand, like, why? What would they get out of that? What would they get out of killing the elderly? Just to be like, we got rid of these people who are wasting our supplies. I don't understand it. They're going to die on the planet anyways. Haruo makes it very clear that the planet's not habitable for human life. So it's just interesting, just something to think about. Maybe they did blow up on entry because of the command. However, as Haruo says, he'd rather not think about that. So let's move on. Haruo says humanity lost not just the Earth to Godzilla, but they also lost justice and dignity, which is something I really like that. Justice and dignity. I like the way they play around with that, having Haruo really feel like he's trying to help regain humanity's dignity as well as his own dignity by fighting and killing Godzilla. Haruo notices Earth, quote-unquote, remembered humanity. This is found when fossilized remains of a city are discovered. So the whole city has basically been fossilized and turned into plants, and you can still see the structure of the buildings in the distance, which is really awesome. After an investigation team goes quiet, Lendon, I think his name's Lendon, it might be Lenad, but Lendon gets suspicious. Just then, some big bird monsters attack. They are pretty metallic, but they can be killed by being shot. It is discovered after the attack humans have been gone for about 19,200 years, so we'll round up and say 20,000 years. Turns out that the fog on the planet is not fog after all. It's actually pollen produced by the plants, by the trees. The only way to get rid of the fog is to burn down the entire forest, which is going to be difficult considering it's basically metal. Lenad now wants to retreat from Earth, gather resources while waiting on the moon, and then leave the planet entirely and leave the solar system. Haruo confronts him about this, saying that this is their planet and they can't give up on it twice. The Servum injured and killed as many as 50 people, making retreat the only logical solution. Mephthes brings up the point that although retreat is logical, it's impractical. The groups are split over such a large area because they're waiting to attack Godzilla. It would mean everyone has to reconvene at one central point before leaving the planet. The evacuation starts because Lendon's just like, screw it. And I know I keep bouncing back between the names Lendon and Lenad. It's just because I really honestly don't remember this character's name. He's not a bad character. I actually like his kind of character motivations, how he's like, I really want to be the hero, I want to take over, I want to rule the world someday, but I'll do it as a nice, good, charismatic leader should. I'm not going to be like a dictator or anything. He's like, I just want to be a cool guy. I want to be a hotshot just like my heroes. And Haruo's like, yeah, you're such a little kid in the heart. You really got to focus on just killing Godzilla here, guy. Let's not focus on afterward. Let's focus on just getting it done for now. And then Lenad's just like, you know, let's abandon the planet because I don't want to deal with confrontation. And also, it's logical because a lot of our people died. And Haruo's like, hey, you big idiot. And then Lenad's like, I am a big idiot, and saves Haruo. Actually, I genuinely do think he's a cool character. He's not too memorable in the long scheme of things. You got Haruo. Haruo and Martin are honestly the only characters I actually really like in this movie. I think Mephthes is okay, and Lendon or Lenad, whatever his name is not bad either. But overall, I really only do like Haruo, and Martin is pretty cool as well. Adam's got some cool moments in here, but Adam really doesn't do much in this movie. And for some of you, you don't even know who I'm talking about because this movie focuses so centrally on Haruo that you really don't even get time to know the other characters' names. Anyways, the evacuation starts but requires the movement of all ships through the Tarasawa Pass. This is where Godzilla lives, and this starts to create fear amongst the people while evacuating. Mephes warns Haruo that Earth's Godzilla's home now. They showed up and started dropping bombs looking to pick a fight, and now Godzilla's gonna bring it to him. Another reference to Kong Skull Island, interesting enough. Actually, those aren't the words he uses, but still, that's the basic speech he gives. He claims Godzilla has received the message, aka the message to fight, and will soon be searching for humanity in order to make them pay. He says that this is part of the Exif's legend, and the destruction of worlds because of large creatures like Godzilla isn't an uncommon thing in the large grand universe. Mephes says Godzilla is divine anger, and he will make humanity pay for their creations and actions until they learn their lesson to stop trying to play God. I really don't know what the hell Mephes is talking about, because the humans don't do too much evil stuff in this timeline that we know of. They just live out their normal lives blowing nukes up like we do in our world, so I guess he could be talking about that. This could be a reference to the creation of Hedorah in this universe, who we'll get into in another video, but Hedorah basically was some sort of bioweapon created by humanity. Or this could be a new origins for Godzilla that we don't quite know of, where Godzilla was also a bioweapon engineered. Or this could be the old origins of Godzilla, in which Godzilla is created due to humanity's errors, blowing up nukes and turning him from a radiated dinosaur into Godzilla. That could also be what they're talking about. I don't really know. I hope we get an answer next movie about if Godzilla was a Godzilla before turning into Godzilla. Or it could just be the old school 54 origins, where Godzilla's in the ocean, gets hit by a nuke, and is like, hey, that didn't feel good, and so he just shows up and starts killing people. I really do not know. Just then, Godzilla appears in the Tarasawa Pass. Due to the Servum's attack, the shuttle Haruo, Mephes, Lendon, and Yuko are in cannot evade in time. Haruo runs off from the main ship, jumping into an attack craft to fight Godzilla head on. The ship crashes and explodes while people are evacuating. Haruo fights Godzilla in a speeder. Godzilla isn't attacking Haruo, meaning the data that Haruo is looking for isn't being collected. They don't know which organ is producing this shield. Lenad, whose real name might be Lendon, again, I really don't know, I don't remember, then appears to retreat to leave Haruo to die. It's a really cool mislead, and the first time I saw it, I was really like, oh, I can't believe he'd do that. Haruo goes to sacrifice himself so Martin can collect data needed to kill Godzilla. Last second, Haruo pulls away because Lendon shows up in a tank and starts bombing Godzilla as well. Lendon sacrifices himself in return for Haruo so Haruo can live on. His last words are, "This planet can go to hell," which is awesome. I absolutely love that. That's another thing. This character, his sacrifice and his last words, just really all together, I like the character due to those kinds of things. Godzilla blows him up with the atomic breath, and then Godzilla heads out. We don't really know where he goes. He kind of just walks away into the valley. Someone else is put in charge. We don't quite know who yet, especially because the Netflix subtitles don't appear on this scene. It's just blank. He is ordered to do whatever he can to save lives. The data reveals that the shield is generated from Godzilla's central dorsal fin, which is a cool use of the dorsal fins. Shin Godzilla is really the only other movie to actually have a logical explanation for why Godzilla has these dorsal fins. We get it from all the other movies. He charges up his atomic breath using these, but Shin Godzilla, you know that they're a ventilation system for his blood inside of him that heats up due to the nuclear fission inside of his body. In this movie, we know that they generate the shield that protects his body and helps him regenerate his skin. And really, other than that, we don't ever get a good explanation for why he has these things. So it turns out that Mephes was put in charge, but as a result of his religion scripture, he turns down the responsibility. It is the Exif Creed that people are created for certain reasons. He believes that Haruo's reason is to destroy Godzilla and lead people, humanity, and the Exif to Sanctuary, and the other alien race that has a stupid name that I don't want to try and pronounce. Because of this, Haruo is put in charge. Haruo orders an attack on Godzilla. Haruo sets traps in the valley and plans to lure Godzilla into a dense area and trap him. Then they will kill him. Godzilla is attacked by manned gliders, and he mainly only uses the atomic breath to defend against them. The Servums interrupt the attack, killing a fair amount of people, and Haruo orders the large landing ships to go distract Godzilla in order to pull Godzilla further into the valley. I think this is kind of a big mistake on Haruo's part, because that's super reckless, and they call that out in the movie, and he kind of throws one back at Adam, who calls him out on that. It's like, hey, I thought Earth was our home. That's where humanity came from, right? we have no reason to leave. If all the ships are shot down, we're already home. Which is basically him being like, hey, screw you guys who want to leave. I hate you. Let's go kill Godzilla because I want to. It kind of makes him a selfish character. I hope they do something with that in the next movie where they have him learn a lesson. Godzilla's hit with thermobaric bombs which get his attention. Adam's ship is shot down, but Adam escapes in time, and Godzilla falls into the valley. Now he is drawn into the trap area. Godzilla walks in the trap point and bombs go off and he gets stuck in rocks. Godzilla is bombarded with tons of tanks and missiles and everything that you could think of. The dorsal fin is shot off, and as it's regenerating, Haruo takes a mech into battle. The other power suits all follow him. They shoot EMPs into Godzilla's body which disrupt the frequency that his body emits. His body emits some sort of sound that creates this shield, and if they can disrupt that and amplify it, his body will drop the shield permanently. The dorsal fin fails to regrow. Godzilla tries to use his atomic breath, but because of the EMPs amplifying the noise inside of his body, the detonation of the atomic breath happens internally and Godzilla explodes just like in GMK. Earth is saved and Haruo has survived. It's a total victory, right? Well, sort of, until Martin discovers that this Godzilla really didn't have anything different with the last Godzilla that they saw 20,000 years ago, meaning this is probably a new Godzilla, because the old one will have certainly changed after 20,000 years, assuming it's still alive. Haruo gets all cocky, being like, yeah, whatever, we took down one Godzilla, we can do it again. Then suddenly a mountain erupts, Godzilla arises from it. This Godzilla, the real Godzilla from the beginning of the movie, is 300 meters and rising compared to the 50 meters of the Godzilla we saw previously in the movie. He's over 100,000 tons. Mephites reveals that this is the true incarnation of death and destruction. He calls it the King of Destruction. This is destiny. This was always going to happen according to Mephites. I think this is who Mephites meant Haruo is destined to destroy. Haruo will lead to the death of this Godzilla. I think that's truly what Mephites believes. Haruo orders an immediate evacuation of Earth. Godzilla roars down multiple landing ships, which is absolutely awesome. This Godzilla has some of the coolest abilities. He's got the atomic breath of course, but he also has this sonic wave that he can shoot out of his mouth that just disrupts everything and explodes stuff that come into contact with it. It's basically a video game superpower. Godzilla's tail then blows up a forest and kills almost every single human on the surface. This happens for multiple reasons. Number one, Godzilla's tail is so big when he swings it, it creates a shockwave. And number two, there's theories online, and I haven't been able to find true confirmation of this, but there's theories online that Godzilla's tail, the reason it explodes so much of the land around it, is because it can interact with the land, because Godzilla is sort of closely related to the plants on this new Earth, meaning when he swings his tail over them, they kind of just erupt because he can manipulate the material in the atmosphere. Haruo is about to die, and then the credits roll. That's just where we're left off. And the first time I saw that, I was literally so like, no, they can't do this, and then it just ends, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this, you've got to be kidding me. I have to wait for the next one to find out if he's alive. But it's okay, we know he's alive, because in the after credit scene, Haruo wakes up to see a native girl who has rescued him. That's the end of the movie for good. I don't think it's the best Godzilla movie. I actually wouldn't put it in my top 15 list even, maybe. Actually, it might be like 15 or around the bottom half of the top list, but it definitely isn't one of the best Godzilla movies. However, I still do think this is a solid entry in the series. Now, about Godzilla's design, a lot of people have been saying, oh, it's just a ripoff of the 2014 design. I personally like this design a little bit more than the 2014 design for a couple reasons. Number one, the eyes are bigger. Number two, I think he's generally more well-proportioned. I don't think he looks as fat as the 2014 Godzilla looked, and I just think he generally looks more appealing. I also love the beard spike on the full-grown Godzilla and just how jagged he looks. I would love to see this design realized in full live action. The things that I dislike about it are the blue nature of the original Godzilla's color, the baby Godzilla that we see throughout the movie. I don't really think he looks all that interesting. He's just kind of this dark blue color, and it's just kind of boring to look at. The other Godzilla, we never actually see what he looks like. He's covered in dirt the whole movie when we see him, so he's just brown, which is kind of boring to look at. I would prefer if he went back to like his gray or black look for next movie. I think that always looks better on film, but this is an anime. Maybe they decided that the black didn't look good, so they went away with it. I'm not totally sure. As for the human storyline in this movie, I think it's pretty good. I think that Haruo is a really interesting main character. I'm not too familiar with anime, so I'm not used to the whole, archetype of, you killed my family, I'm gonna take you down, that's popularized in Attack on Titan. I think Haruo is a pretty cool cool character. As for the other characters, however, I think Martin's the only one with the true personality. Mephthes is alright. I do enjoy Mephthes' whole, like, overly religious angle, but other than that, we really don't know anything about any of the other characters. We know that Yuko likes Haruo because she wants to be strong like she thinks he is, and we know that Adam is a nice guy, and we know that Lendon wanted to be a hero. We really don't know anything about the characters in this movie other than Haruo, so I really only like Haruo, and as I said, Martin I think is a good character, but to be honest, I think only Haruo is going to stick with me for a while, and I look forward to seeing him in the sequel. However, I would say that this is definitely not one of the top casts you're going to get in a Godzilla movie. This is definitely not one of the top set of characters you're going to get in a Godzilla movie. They're ultimately forgettable characters outside of the main character, which is okay because it's a central story around him, not an ensemble cast like Shin Godzilla, but I don't like these characters as much as I like, say, Shin Godzilla or 2014. As for kaiju stuff in this movie, it's good, but it's not great. I could have done with more of it. We don't see too much of Godzilla doing anything other than shooting his atomic breath, which doesn't feel that far out of line with what we've been seeing in the past. I just would have liked to see him do a little bit more. He doesn't even feel like he moves half the time he's on screen. He kind of just stands there. So I would have liked to see him do a little bit more. I get that he's so big that he can't do too much, but until we finally get to see the real Godzilla in the last 4 minutes of the movie, we don't get too much of Godzilla doing anything. Then that Godzilla actually does stuff. He moves a lot. He blows stuff up. He actually has a really different, interesting looking design compared to the one that came before him. I don't know, he just has more personality to him too, and his expressions and everything, so I think that I can get behind a full movie about this Godzilla more than I can get behind this movie itself. Other than that, the Servum didn't really do much, and I don't really have anything to say about the other kaiju because they weren't in the movie other than in silhouette, which is disappointing to say the least. I would have enjoyed a full movie of the timeline of the Monster Planet history leading up to humans evacuating Earth. Next movie, I would have appreciated to pick up humans coming back to Earth after their subspace navigation fails and everyone dies on that planet. Basically, this is what I would have as the sequel in the trilogy. Actually, I wouldn't even have it be a trilogy. I would have it be like a four-parter because I definitely think you need the backstory, and I think it would be better if it was told outside of just news flashbacks at the start of this movie. The effects in this movie, do I really want to call it effects? Because it's not. It's animation. It's CGI animation, so I guess effects, but this feels like a mixture of CGI and classic hand-drawn animation. I think it's pretty good. I wouldn't say that they're like outstanding effects. I can really appreciate the groundbreaking nature of them. I wouldn't even say they're like better than the live action stuff from the 60s because it's animation. It's not as visually appealing. That just comes with the genre. I'm not gonna knock the movie because it's a genre. I'm gonna knock the movie because it was a boring movie. It wasn't, but you get what I'm saying. That's the kind of thing that I ding it for. So I'm not going to ding it for the animation. I personally don't like anime as much as I like live action stuff. So as for effects, I'm really not going to judge it on effects, which just kind of makes this portion of the video worthless, but whatever. I covered it in all the other ones. I always cover the effects. Music. The music in this movie, it's growing on me. It is growing on me. There is some music in this movie that I absolutely find to be amazing. Godzilla's main theme's pretty awesome. Anytime we get a military march is super cool. Some of the battle themes are alright. However, whenever we get techno music, it really takes me out of it. I don't like the techno stuff. I'm not about that life. I don't think the composer Hattori really brings it as much as, say, our composer from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla does. However, I do think this is his best work in the franchise, so I will commend him for that. The plot was okay. It's not too generic. A lot of people say, oh, it's a ripoff of Interstellar. Well, guess what, suckers? I've never seen Interstellar, so I can appreciate this movie on its own. So yeah, I thought the plot was pretty interesting, and I really like some of the decisions they made with the aliens. I think this is the most original alien storyline we've ever had in a Godzilla movie, and I like a lot of the elements of it. I do. I think it's a good movie. Overall, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. I'm not going to say this is the best Godzilla movie ever. I mean, I definitely, like I said, I'm not going to pretend that I thought it was amazing just for the sake of, I don't know, pretending that it was amazing. I just thought it was a good movie. I definitely would watch it again, and I have watched it multiple times, but ultimately, this isn't going to be one that I go back to every couple of months like I do with some of the other ones, because this one's just not as good as some of the other ones. I would much rather watch Godzilla vs. King Kong, or Shin Godzilla, or 1954 Godzilla. I wouldn't put this one on the list of like, gotta watch it again immediately. And even when I watched it the first day, I was like, well, I should probably watch it again because I have reviews to make. But ultimately, it's a good movie. I just don't really feel too much need to watch it too many times. I do enjoy watching it. Every time I watch it, I have a good time with it. But it's just not one of the standouts for me, which is okay. It doesn't need to be. A lot of people are going to ding this movie because it is really the big setup for the trilogy. However, I appreciate world building. I appreciate what they did in this movie. I love the fact that we're setting up for a sequel. I love that Kong Skull Island was setting up for Godzilla vs. Kong half the time. I always appreciate that in movies. I love world building. I don't often understand the complaint about, oh, this was just a big trailer for another movie, because, like, first of all, no, it wasn't. It clearly wasn't. It can stand on its own. Second of all, so what? You know, we're gonna get that sequel eventually, and especially with this in an anime format. Anime often does this, in my experience anyways. It's build up for a sequel or for a next episode or something along those lines. This is considered a series. Even Netflix labels it as Godzilla the series, so I'm totally fine with this being an extended first episode, an extended pilot that just leaves us on a pretty interesting, fascinating cliffhanger, and I appreciate the setup for the sequel, so I don't have any problems with that. So there you go, guys. That's my review for Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. Like I said earlier, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. It's a good movie. I'd say go check it out at least once if you're a Godzilla fan. It's free on Netflix, assuming you have Netflix, so it's worth it. It's a very experimental film, and I appreciate this dive into a new genre and this attempt to do something original in the Godzilla franchise. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See y'all next time. D-Man, out. What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we are doing the 36th episode of Godzilla-Thon. That is right. After 7 years, it is time for Godzilla-Thon to return. The last Godzilla-Thon I did was for Godzilla Planet of the Monsters back on January 31st, 2018. I cannot believe how long ago that was. It really doesn't feel like that long ago to me, but that was the last Godzilla-Thon I did, and there's been quite a few Godzilla movies since then. So to celebrate hitting 101,954 subscribers, aka 10/1954, I wanted to relaunch Godzilla-Thon, and with this relaunch of Godzilla-Thon, I'm going back to the original style. I'm gonna keep doing these reviews in the same exact format I did them back in the day. A detailed, in-depth, plot-by-plot, beat-by-beat breakdown of each movie in a podcast-styled format, and I'll take us all the way to the newest Godzilla film. At the moment, it's Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. And that way the original run of Godzilla-Thon can be completed, at least for now. And so today we're jumping into the very controversial Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle. This thumbnail art I did all the way back in 2019. I did this in May 2019 because I was originally going to resume Godzilla-Thon back in 2019, and then I made Kong-a-thon my priority, and then that obviously had its own delays and such. But now we're here for Godzilla-Thon. We're back. It's time. So today, I'm gonna run you through what is generally considered to be like everybody's least favorite Godzilla movie. It's considered like the worst Godzilla movie, but you know what? Hot take? I think that this movie's fantastic. I really think it is, and the longer it sits with me, the more I watch it, the more I appreciate it. So, in a way, I'm gonna be defending the hell out of Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle because I think it has such an unearned reputation. I think it is truly, truly a very well-written movie, and maybe one of the, not like the best, but maybe one of the more well-written Godzilla movies that is out there. It's just really light on spectacle, which is what everybody wanted. The Godzilla Anime Trilogy really suffers from one thing overall, and that is expectation. People wanted it to be Final Wars the anime. They wanted a Godzilla Rulers of Earth adaptation in an anime format, and instead, we got these really slow philosophical movies. And, you know, that's not everybody's cup of tea, but you know what? I think that this is a very, very well-written movie. I think it is shockingly well done, especially because in memory, this is the weakest of the trilogy. I always remember like Monster Planet has some fun elements to it, especially towards the ending of the movie. It really kicks off with Godzilla Earth, and then especially Godzilla the Planet Eater I've really grown to love, but This one, City on the Edge of Battle, I always remember being the weakest link, and I'll say, after rewatching Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, both the English and Japanese dubs before jumping into both the English and Japanese dub of Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, I don't feel that way anymore. I think Monster Planet's still very good, but I do think it's the weakest link. I think that this movie really is where they hit their stride. I really do think that this is solid. I know that people wanted it to be Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, the all-out crazy anime, and I know that there's that fan animation that's got Mechagodzilla fighting Godzilla for like 30 minutes, but that's not what I come to Godzilla movies for. The thing that makes Godzilla so special is the deeper meanings, the intention, the plot, the character, the story, the emotion. That's always what sets Godzilla apart. As far back as 1954, Godzilla was never just a generic monster movie, and the series has never just been monsters fighting, or at least at its best, it wasn't that. And this movie, I really think, lives up to that. This movie addresses so many of the questions I've had about the Godzilla series, like, well, maybe not a ton, but you know, it addresses one of the biggest in a way that I think is really clever, which is, what is the purpose of Mechagodzilla? I mean, just from a conceptual standpoint, if you can build something that can kill Godzilla, a weapon, why not just build a weapon? Why does Absolute Zero need to be mounted on Mechagodzilla? Why not mount Absolute Zero on a cannon and then have a bunch of support drones fight Godzilla, keeping his attention while you freeze him and kill him? It's just because Mechagodzilla is a very fun 70s concept. That's why Mechagodzilla exists. It has no practical use in reality. I mean, if you can build a laser that can cut through Godzilla's face, you can just build the laser to do it. I guess actually GVK makes a pretty good argument for what Mechagodzilla's use is, and that's just to pry his jaws open. But on the whole, Mechagodzilla just is kind of silly, and this movie directly addresses that head on. Mechagodzilla, they directly acknowledge, is kind of an outdated tactic to take on Godzilla, and if they have the technology to build something to fight Godzilla that can kill him, why not just build a big gun that can kill him? Why do you have to go through the whole ordeal of Mechagodzilla? So I understand why people are not the biggest fan of this movie. I understand why it's a letdown, and it's just that for me, it doesn't let me down. I'm okay with it. I know that people love Godzilla fighting monsters, and so do I, but I have movies where he does that. If I want to watch Godzilla fight Mechagodzilla, there's of course the original movies, there's the Heisei movie if you want it to be a bit more of like a beam battle, then there's the movies that I think really nail it perfectly, which is the Kiryu saga, and now we even have Godzilla vs. Kong. This movie provides a very different alternative to that scenario, the Godzilla versus technology scenario, one that I think is truly fantastic and compelling. I did a video back in the day on how Mechagodzilla City is the perfect foil for Godzilla Earth, and I completely stand by that. All this preamble just to say, I get why it's not everybody's favorite, and in fact, I understand why this movie's many people's least favorite Godzilla movie, but for me, this one really works. And it just happens to be one of those movies that came out back in the day, you know, back when this channel was in its stride, and so I have a lot of very fond memories of this movie and the era and covering it in the lead up and aftermath. In particular, I have mostly fond memories of the Planet Eater, but I'm sure I'll get there next video. And without further ado, let's talk about Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle. The second installment of the Godzilla Anime Trilogy was released just 6 months after Godzilla Monster Planet in Japan. That is a super fast turnaround for Godzilla movies. This released in May 2018, and it was done by Polygon Pictures and Toho Animation. Instead of going full-on action-packed, crazy over-the-top, this movie had a really low budget, and so they opted for a psychological drama over action spectacle, and for me that's alright. We pick up moments after Monster Planet with the Aratarum? I still to this day don't know how to say that spaceship's name. I don't think they ever say it in the movies. We pick up moments after Monster Planet with the Aratarum picking up the remaining signals revealing Godzilla Earth has destroyed all of the transport ships after the death of Godzilla Phileas. Realizing Godzilla's atomic breath can reach low orbit, a debate breaks out over if they should evacuate and abandon the survivors or if they should wait, try and see if there's survivors, but risk getting killed by Godzilla. And these are the types of philosophical debates that this movie really excels with. We then pick up right where the post-credits scene left off, with Haruo waking up in a native's hut. He's covered in this orange dust, and he discovers that humans can safely live in areas below where the toxic tree fog will reach. Honestly, the toxic tree fog is one of the least developed elements of the Godzilla Anime Trilogy, and one of the things that I think they do the worst, which is just making the environment like this foggy, gloomy, in a way very dull to look at. It gets very repetitive to look at environment, and I don't even really know the purpose because the Hautua can live in it just fine. timeline. So like, what does it symbolically mean? Just that I guess Earth has moved on from humanity. While trying to locate his friends, Haruo is saved from a servum's nest, a servum larva nest with like these worm-like servums. I'm not a huge fan of the servums, to be honest. I especially don't like how they're all one color, like just that bluish color, like that metallic blue. He's saved by the native, Miana. Meanwhile, Yuko and some survivors battle a nearly identical native. Haruo saves Miana from being accidentally killed by his friends. I don't know why they want to open fire on a human so bad. Even if that human scared them, it seems like they're kind of antagonizing that fight, as the Hatua don't strike me as the type to just kill you just because you're there, especially because they literally don't in a minute. But I guess they're scared and they might think she's a monster. So anyways, Haruo saves her from being killed, only for a bunch of natives to capture him and his friends. They take the survivors to their underground kingdom. I think that environment looks really pretty. It's really cool. There, they reunite with others, like Martin and Galagoo. Martin theorizes, and this is one thing that I think is funny, throughout the whole movie, Martin keeps throwing out these crazy theories that are often very pessimistic, and also like completely constantly downplaying the Hatua, only for him to be very often proved wrong. So Martin theorizes that the natives are actually evolved from insects rather than humans. I don't know really why he reaches that conclusion. Well, the Bilisaludo decide that they're too primitive to be considered human, which I think is so silly. Actually, they say that they're too primitive to be considered humanoid, which just isn't true. They are humanoid, even if they're primitive. They're taken to a ritual altar where they learn that the women are twins, Miana and Maina. I really wish there was even just a bit more of a difference between their names, because it still trips me up to this day which is which. Miana is the nicer one, Maina is the meaner one, the more aggressive one. But it is hard to tell them apart, and I also still don't know if I'm totally pronouncing Maina's name right. The natives are called the Hatua, and they worship an egg. I really like all the Mothra Easter eggs in here. They also learn the Hatua are telepathic, and can quickly learn. Like, this is one of those things that I think is so funny, because they act like they're like super primitive and unadvanced and kind of dumb, but like they have mastered telepathy. Of course they wouldn't speak with a verbal language if they've mastered telepathy. I don't know how no one brings that point up the whole movie. The Hatua question why the gang is so violent, then reveal that Godzilla is also their enemy, because Godzilla is the enemy to their god, which I think is really cool. It's actually Godzilla is who killed their god, and the only thing their god left behind was an egg. The Hatua warned that anyone who has ever tried to take on Godzilla dies, which is why they've chosen to coexist with Godzilla. I think that is really cool. The idea that like, no matter what you do, anybody who takes on Godzilla dies, it really solidifies his godlike status, kind of solidifies Mephi's whole prophecy. And also at the same time, it threads in those themes of coexistence, which obviously is like a Godzilla King of the Monsters thing, but it is in this trilogy. The whole idea of this whole trilogy is that you cannot fight things like Godzilla, you just must coexist with them in peace and harmony like the Hatua do. The Hatua are the template, not Haruo. We're not supposed to be inspired by him, and that's actually brought up later in this very movie. Martin discovers the Hatua are highly advanced and learns that Phileas, Godzilla Phileas, the Servum, and even the trees are all subspecies of Godzilla, which is explained a little differently in the English and Japanese versions. In the Japanese versions, they're all stated to be subspecies of Godzilla, adapting his traits in order to survive on the planet with him. Whereas in the English version, it's explained a little differently. It's said that they're not subspecies of Godzilla, they're still their own unique species, it's just that they have adapted traits from Godzilla in order to better survive his proximity. There's a divide in the gang with people like Bellobe, who remember fighting Godzilla 20 years earlier and how powerful he was and how hard it was to beat him, and then the younger humans, who don't have any memory of that at all, who think that they shouldn't continue fighting Godzilla and should leave. I really like that too, because it shows like, of course, people who remember fighting Godzilla back in the day, coming off the victory of Godzilla Phileas, would view that as an overall victory and then a separate defeat at the hands of the original Godzilla, whereas of course the younger people view this whole thing as a suicide mission. It's then made very clear explicitly, which is only something that gets more context in the next movie, how guided Haruo is by Mephi's. I mean, even in this scene, he's directly reflecting on a conversation he had with Mephi's, and it's only once he reflects on that he's reaffirmed in his decision to fight Godzilla again, because Mephi's has convinced him it's his destiny. It's his destiny to destroy Godzilla. It's very clear throughout this whole movie that Haruo is basically coming up against his own feelings, which are that he should abandon the fight with Godzilla, and the way he's essentially been programmed by years of influence from Mephi's to continue fighting Godzilla at all costs. I love that setup here. It's so well written. It's not overt and in your face. Other than this one flashback, you only get scenes where whenever Haruo is like a little lost or unsure of himself, he wishes Mephies was there to tell him what to do, and it becomes very clear Mephies has been telling him what to do his whole life. I think that is a great way to sow the seeds for the next film, and why it's such a struggle for Haruo to overcome Mephies in the next movie. The Aratrum then discovers that Godzilla patrols the same path. It's the same pattern that he patrols. Meanwhile, Haruo and the humans search for a landing ship through a signal they detected. The natives then reveal their names as Miana and Mina. Mina is more aggressive and combat ready. Yuko is then jealous of them and their fondness of Haruo. I don't like the subplot with Yuko and Haruo. I don't really know how I feel about Yuko anymore. I used to hate her guts. I hated her. I don't hate her anymore as much as I don't really understand the purpose of that character in the first movie. They treat her like she's got this really deep pre-established relationship with Haruo, while at the same time treating it like they don't really know each other and haven't really interacted up to this point. Like it's like they can't decide. On the one hand, it seems like Haruo has a really close connection to her grandpa. On the other hand, I don't know if him and her actually have that much history. I also am unsure of the age gap between those two, but one thing I'm sure of is that she feels very strongly for him and he doesn't really feel as strongly for her. Because she's all upset about the twins' fondness of Haruo, Yuko then runs off into the servant pit. This scene's a little weird. I don't know why the tentacles tentacle the way they do. It's a little suspicious, man. I don't think that they needed to attack her in quite that way, but they like literally wrap around her legs and pull her legs apart before trying to eat her. It's a little suggestive, I would say. It's odd. She's then saved by the Hautua's nanometal arrows. Adult servums then attack, but are defeated by Mephies, my favorite dude, who shows up with the surviving infantry. Then, as Mori abandons the search for the survivors, the Exif leader receives a message through a device called Garbatrium from the Exif god, warning them that the survivors will contact them shortly. This is also something that I'm very interested in. Does that mean that Ghidorah is waiting because he's hungering, kind of like Galactus? He hungers to eat the earth and he really wants to? I'm guessing that's kind of what it is, because they're getting a message from Ghidorah. Ghidorah is sending them a message being like, hey, don't leave yet. Things are gonna go the way you want. Like, Ghidorah can kind of see the future, it seems. And so he's warning them to hang out and wait. And sure enough, they do get a message just immediately afterward. Mephies gets a message to the ship. In return, an extract ship is sent down to collect the survivors and get them out of there. Haruo explains once the ship lands that he still plans to fight Godzilla with the help of the Bilisaludo and the newly discovered nanometal. They explain that the nanometal can only be caused by Mechagodzilla, as he was the last remaining source of nanometal, and therefore, if there's nanometal, it means Mechagodzilla is still around somewhere. Turns out the Hautua have discovered nanometal, and they've learned to fuse things with it on a molecular level. Kind of like the nanometal just instantly fuses whatever touches it. I don't know how that means it's not constantly spreading to the ground that it sits on, but whatever, move on. This actually allows the Hautua to enhance their weapons with nanometal. However, it's important to note they don't rely on it, and it's not a really essential part of their culture. In fact, they view it as straight up poisonous. I think that's really important because there's people that are like, well, how come the Hautua get to use nanometal? If nanometal's ultimately at the end of this movie, the theme of the movie is that we should reject something like nanometal, why do the Hautua get to use it? Because that's not what the theme of the movie is. The theme of the movie isn't that we should reject technology. The theme of the movie is that we should reject an over-reliance on it to the point that we sacrifice our own humanity. And the Hautua have not sacrificed their own humanity. They have once again found a way to coexist with the nanometal. To ensure that Mechagodzilla wouldn't proliferate, we actually find out that they use some sort of inhibitor placed on Mechagodzilla that would stop the nanometal from spreading. Maybe that's why the nanometal doesn't spread all the time to the things that it sits on. But anyways, it turns out that during Godzilla's attack on Mount Fuji back in the day, Godzilla destroyed parts of Mechagodzilla, including parts of his inhibitor. Therefore, the nanometal has been allowed to spread. A few humans actually retreat back to space, but not the humans that come down to pick them up. I always think that's interesting, that the humans who come down to pick people up wind up listening to Haruo's speech and joining his cause. Most join Haruo in discovering the source of the nanometal and just sticking with him in seeing where things are gonna go, hoping that his plan will work to kill Godzilla. Martin reveals then that if all life on Earth evolved traits of Godzilla in order to survive, then humanity must have done something similar in order to survive this world of monsters, on this planet of the monsters. They must have developed some sort of traits from an insect kaiju in order to survive, which is why they have some sort of insect level qualities to them, like the scaly dust that they produce. Martin explains then, only now, halfway through the second movie, that kaiju kaiju evolved due to global warming, pollution, and nuclear testing. This is what gave birth to the kaiju, and in particular the nuclear testing is what gave birth to Godzilla. So they retain their generally original origins. It's just not all of them are nuclear. Some of them are more like monsters created from pollution, whereas Godzilla seems to be the nuclear monster. Because Godzilla has stopped this harm to the planet, defeating humanity in a sense, Earth then chose Godzilla as God, and all life adapted in his favor. I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. It's very Godzilla King of the Monsters, and actually it's a little more interestingly done because Godzilla King of the Monsters sets up those wonderful ideas and then it's never followed upon in the Monsterverse. Whereas here, this is a full trilogy unpacking that, yeah, if the kaiju are nature's balance, then nature would be in their favor. It's just something interesting to think, like, from a certain perspective, from the planet's perspective, humanity is kind of the villains. The Servum attack again on the way to Mechagodzilla, but detecting Godzilla's DNA is in the area, the ground erupts into these nanometal spikes, killing and absorbing the Servum into nanometal, turning them into it, leading to the discovery of Mechagodzilla City. Probably the single most divisive thing this trilogy does. Instead of having Mechagodzilla, it turns out Mechagodzilla was pretty much entirely destroyed back in the day, but he did activate. He just chose not to go to combat with Godzilla, or at least he was attacked too quickly before he could. The result was that some of Mechagodzilla survived and continued its mission to take down Godzilla, realizing that it couldn't rebuild itself to fight Godzilla properly, as it knew it would lose that battle. It instead opted to become a city, an ever-evolving Mechagodzilla city that grew over 20,000 years. It's actually in the ruins of the whole Mechagodzilla was destroyed in, and has generally rebuilt the facility Mechagodzilla was built in the first place, with some Mechagodzilla AI additions. They find the downed head of Mechagodzilla, realizing that some of his AI unit is still intact, while some of it has been blown apart. This is why Mechagodzilla is kind of not fully operating. It's only sort of passively going about its mission. Fully reactivating Mechagodzilla, the city comes to life with some awesome music. I love that scene. And then we find out that rather than building Mechagodzilla, again, it's just an impractical thing to do. Instead, they transform the entire city into a Godzilla execution trap. I love that. It's here 44 minutes in, about halfway through the movie, that we glimpse the sleeping Godzilla. Now, sometimes Godzilla does take about 40 minutes to appear in a movie, especially those American movies, but this does feel like it takes particularly long to get to Godzilla, and even now he's just sleeping. I don't know how Godzilla could sleep for 20,000 years, immediately wake up and then go to sleep less than like a couple hours later, but dude sleeps. That's all Godzilla Earth really does. Turns out that Godzilla's patrol is basically all around the city, as the city has a natural camouflage that Godzilla cannot detect it. So Godzilla knows something's in the area and has been lurking trying to find it, but for 20,000 years never has detected it just due to the camouflage, and that also explains why Godzilla-Phileus lived in this area as well. It perfectly explains why Mechagodzilla City, Godzilla Earth, and Godzilla-Phileus would all be in generally the same exact location. It's not an over-convenience or anything, it's that basically Godzilla-Phileus and Godzilla Earth were hunting for Mechagodzilla City this whole time. By reactivating the city, Godzilla stands a much better shot of finding out where they are, so they're trying to speedrun things. The mechs from the last movie are upgraded into the Vultures. I think the Vultures are awesome. I love their design. I love the pink-purple things that shoot out of them. They're jets, and I love the streaks they leave through the air. I also love how they like shoot in 90-degree angles. I think that they are so cool. They might be my favorite non-Mechagodzilla mechs in the Godzilla series, and are certainly my favorite human-built little like weapons, if you're gonna put them in the category of like Super X or Argo Jet. The Vultures are my favorite. I think they're fantastic. I think they're really cool. They devise a plan to basically transform Mechagodzilla City into an upgraded version of their previous Godzilla trap, which has already proven successful in killing Godzilla-Phileus. With this nanometal mist they're going to use to disperse Godzilla's atomic breath, they can build this, basically, it's a giant hallway that lures Godzilla into a kill point. I actually think it's a really, really cool idea. It's especially cool because it upgrades us from like a completely natural way to fight Godzilla, nature against Godzilla, into purely technology against Godzilla. However, this plan will require a lot of time, and so therefore they're worried that Godzilla will wake up and find them first. Mephies then has the Bilisaludo repair an Exif Gamatron crystal, which was previously destroyed during Godzilla's original attack on the lab. I also think that's great. It explains why the Exif haven't executed their Ghidorah plan sooner. We then find out that both the Hautua and humans have become suspicious of the Bilisaludo and the nanometal. Mephies doesn't trust it either. This causes Haruo to start having doubts. He realizes that he has an obsession with Godzilla. He's not the only one, man. I do too. I don't know what's up with that. But he realizes he has an obsession with Godzilla, and it's all for personal reasons. It's all about revenge for him. He finally comes to this realization that it was never really about human pride, and for him, it's about his own hurt, you know? This is a big moment for him. He starts to realize that, well, he can never let go of this anger, and he will always want to fight Godzilla. He shouldn't involve others, which I would say he doesn't really. I mean, he gives them the chance multiple times in both the last movie and this movie with multiple speeches being like, you can join me or you don't have to. You do not have to, and everybody volunteers to join him just because he's persuasive. And here again, Haruo still can't shake the influence of Mephies, who's like, no dude, this is your destiny. You're destined to fight Godzilla, and people chose you as their leader. Mephies is constantly working him in these small ways. I think it's great. And here's where we get the ultimate conclusion of the trilogy. It's set up right here, a little over halfway through City on the Edge of Battle. We find out why the trilogy ends the way it does. Yuko reveals that Haruo is an inspiration for the younger people around him. They simply can't remember Earth as it was, and they've become content with the depression, isolation, and coldness of outer space. That is, until Haruo staged his rebellion over the Taui immigration project, proving how abnormal all of this sadness and coldness around them is. Haruo's obsession with Godzilla proved to all of the humans on that ship, especially the younger ones, that you can stay mad at things that are unstoppable. You can learn to hate things that you can't forgive, and you can dedicate your life to revenge. Essentially, the lesson that Haruo has taught all the humans around him is that if you try hard enough, like he did, you can stand a shot of maybe getting a bit of vengeance in the way he killed Godzilla Filius. Haruo has inspired people to not become content with their subpar conditions and to not look for better, but instead to focus on their anger and see it through to the bitter end. That is the lesson Haruo has accidentally taught the people around him, and that it really weighs on him, because this is Yuko telling him that. Yuko's like, this is what you've taught me. You've taught me that you can dedicate yourself to revenge, and that's exactly the decision that'll get her killed in the end, and it's basically his fault. Haruo then starts having these pains and reveals that ever since he wound up at Mechagodzilla City, his previous wounds have really started hurting him again. Martin reveals that actually lots of the soldiers are having this same deal. They all have this pain, and realizes that it's all of the people who were previously treated by the Hautua. He doesn't know why yet. Again, setting up for the next movie. This also explains why the Hautua have a resistance to the nanometal, their little gold dust, and why they view it as a poison. They're basically resistant to it and it harms them. Everyone who was previously healed by the Hautua is re-healed by leaving the city, showing that the city is having a negative impact on them. Meanwhile, it's re-energized the Bilisaludo, taking away their need to eat and sleep and all that stuff. Mephies then gives this sermon to his growing congregation about how the Exiv took to space after a monster destroyed their planet, and now they seek to guide other species to salvation. Haruo then meets up with Mephies and confesses that he feels lost, but Mephies reaffirms his leadership position and the sinister nature of nanometal, putting the seeds of doubt in Haruo even deeper, basically saying, yeah, you shouldn't trust the Bilisaludo, even if they can kill Godzilla. You don't want that. What you want is to do things on your terms. That's what you want. It's a really clever little seed of doubt he's planted here. He warns that if the Bilisaludo are so logical and mechanical, then can they really be considered highly intelligent as they start to lack compassion and emotional range? He warns that nanometal is indistinguishable from a monster. It's just a different type of monster. He explains that the Bilisaludo respect monsters and wish to become one with them. This is something he's probably learned through telepathy, listening to their thoughts. Mephies reveals that towards the end of many civilizations, most species wind up giving birth to monsters by mistake that wind up destroying them. Through technological advancement, they create monsters that wind up being their downfall. He says it's likely that Mechagodzilla is this monster for the Bilisaludo. We don't actually know that. For 20,000 years, Mechagodzilla has only taken over a small portion of the planet, and yes, while the Bilisaludo do dream of a world of a central intelligence, and back in the day it did seem like they had plans to conquer the Earth using Mechagodzilla, there's no real thing to suggest other than Mephies that Mechagodzilla City is truly evil or that the Bilisaludo will turn on humanity. All we learn is that the Bilisaludo want to take down Godzilla and want Mechagodzilla City to develop. It's very possible that in a world where they kill Godzilla, the Bilisaludo would have merged with Mechagodzilla City and gone on to be their own little thing. Maybe they would want to expand and take over the whole planet, but
they never say they do, and there's really no indication other than Mephies that they want that. I think that's also very clever. The fact that, is Mephies even a reliable narrator here? Mephies then shares the secret name to Haruo of the monster that destroyed his planet and warns him that he must hang on to that. When he's fighting Godzilla, he must remember that there is a far more powerful monster that exists in space, and compared to that, Godzilla isn't worth the fear, so he should hang on to his resolve and do what he feels is best. I didn't remember this until just today. I was watching an old video of mine, but apparently back in the day we used to think that that shot from the trailer was Mephies kissing Haruo. What a different movie that would have been. Haruo then reassures Yuko that his goal is to reclaim the Earth for humans, not for the Bilisaludo or anything, but for humans. And so she kisses him in return, and it's very important to note he does not reciprocate. Both Miana and Mina watch on and are quite upset by this. Don't love the love triangle there either, but whatever. The Bilisaludo believe that everyone should reconvene in Mechagodzilla City to fight Godzilla. All the people on the spaceship should go down to Earth and join the battle. Meanwhile, the Exif use this as a way to preach for unification and joining together. You know, the Bilisaludo want to create a world where everybody is in harmony with each other. Well, now the Exif can bandwagon off of this to be like, yes, and you should do that by joining our religion. It's a great way to get them more followers and influence and power as well. The humans begin to fear that with Godzilla dead, there will be nothing to stop Mechagodzilla, and that soon the Bilisaludo will take over the planet. And although again, it's just human suspicion. They then, in Mechagodzilla City, discover Bilisaludo volunteers merging with the nanometal to fuel the battle with Godzilla. But it's important to note that even now, with the Bilisaludo merging with Mechagodzilla City and having ability to influence his AI, they don't force a nanometal takeover of the humans in the city to do the same. They allow them the ability to just continue on as they are. Godzilla reawakens, and now, with Mechagodzilla City active, is very likely to find them in just hours. In order to speed up the completion timeline of Mechagodzilla City, Haruo redirects all energy from defensive heat shields to offensive weapons. I wonder if they had just kept things as going, like continued to build Mechagodzilla City as planned, it would have taken a day or so, but would Godzilla have actually found them in that time if the camouflage was still active? It's very possible. Godzilla never finds them, and the plan works perfectly when it's time because they've had all the quality assurances done, they have multiple harpoons ready to go, and it's very possible that it was simply these rushed decisions that cost them the battle in the end. Basically, Icarus flying too close to the sun. They got too cocky trying to beat Godzilla before he could beat them. The humans protest the fusion between Bilisaludo and Nanometal, but Galagu explains that it's simply a way for them to turn into neural processors in order to speed up the city's construction. Galagu says he views Godzilla as humanity's greatest achievement. It's their greatest creation, but their biggest mistake was never finding a way to control Godzilla. They argue that they can evolve by joining Mechagodzilla City and turn themselves into essentially a monster, sort of proving Mephies was right. Again, Mephies would know this because he's had the ability to hear their thoughts this whole time. It really does raise the question, is Mephies an unreliable narrator, or is he simply sharing the deeper inner desires of others and being like, hey dude, they're not good people and they're gonna take over the planet? I don't know. I like the fact that they never truly say. It seems like Mephies is probably telling the truth, but he is also super unreliable. A debate then breaks out, which again, I think is really fantastic because it's a very well-written debate here, over if you really do become the perfect organism if you wind up abandoning your emotions in favor of logic and a hive mind. Does that even still qualify as human, or is it some type of other life that's not worth living? It's kind of the question that Evangelion raises as well. You know, like, if there's a central merged intelligence and all the emotions are washed into one, yeah, it would kind of logically wind up with everybody thinking super logically. It would wind up with everybody homogenizing in a way, but is that a life worth living? You sacrifice your individuality in the process, and what does that mean, you know? Is it worth the price of merging with technology in order to evolve? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves now more than ever, especially with AI on the rise, you know? In the future, what is going to be the price if you merge with an AI and that AI is super logical and it speeds you up and it helps your brain process and whatever? Where does your humanity end, and is that a life worth living? What's the point if you can't experience the emotional benefit of it? Yuko shockingly sides with the Bilisaludo here. She says it's simply better than living like the Hautua because we don't know what they're thinking. They're telepathic and they don't communicate. Again, I think they're really downplaying the Hautuas. The Hautua within a day have already started to learn human language. But it's very clear that Yuko's just jealous over Haruo's relationship with the twins. Mechagodzilla City then stops creating its camouflage in favor of directing all those resources towards building weapons, a decision made by the will of the fused overriding the controls of Galagu, seemingly proving the Bilisoluto right, that by fusing with the city you become more effective and they can make decisions that override human capacity. However, it's this same decision, this potentially logical move to try and beat Godzilla before he discovers them, as the probability of him finding them is relatively high, that winds up costing them the battle because they draw Godzilla's attention way too soon as he immediately beelines towards the city the second the camouflage goes down. With an ETA of less than 1 hour, Godzilla winds up stopping in far enough range, because again he can shoot to space, that he can shoot a long distance atomic breath strike towards them. They tried to defuse it with their emergency nanometal mist, but they don't have a lot of time to disperse that, and it causes Godzilla's beam to wind up damaging the city as it isn't reflected as much as it should be. Godzilla in return winds up destroying one half of the EMP harpoons that were meant to kill him. In order to try and delay him, Yuko, Belube, and Haruo, trying to keep the peace between the Bilisoluto and the humans strong, after that whole debate really put them on a shaky grounds, he tries to keep the peace, all take to the vultures and take them into battle. And from here the movie is kicked off into the highest gear. From that moment where the Bilisoluto turn off the camouflage onward, this movie is at an all-time peak. I think it's really, really fantastic. The pacing is great, the drama is really wonderful. It's not as action-packed and as spectacle-driven as some people wanted, but it's totally what I'm into. It's really cool, I think. It's just a little bit weighed down by the animation, I will say, though. Like, if it was better animated, it would be perfect. While trying to lure Godzilla to the trap point, they learned that that second EMP harpoon is completely beyond repair, so Godzilla effectively secured his survival with that one atomic breath maneuver. Godzilla tries his super oscillatory roar, which I think is awesome. It's one of my favorite powers of Godzilla Earth, very underused. I think this is the last time we see him use it. I don't think he uses it in the next movie. It's a super cool ability, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't catch the vultures because they're so fast. The first harpoon then fails the quality test, again proving that they really shouldn't have put down the camouflage, as they just were not ready to take on Godzilla. Godzilla arrives too quickly nonetheless, the vultures can't slow him down, and the plan commences, with the bombing out of the area around Godzilla causing him to fall into a trap below him. It's a very Showa era type plan, you know, that reminds me of King Kong vs. Godzilla, and sort of mixes it with a futuristic spin, like King Kong vs. Godzilla's plan to trap Godzilla, mixed with, you know, Godzilla Raids Again's plan to trap Godzilla, and then added in this whole futuristic twist. It's really cool, I think. Godzilla falls into their big nanometal hallway, and it's filled with that diffusion gas that causes atomic breath to reflect all over the place, but again, it's still effective enough to strike a few things in the city, almost hitting Haruo, but in a weird scene that I'm not totally sure what happens, he's saved by the twins. I don't know if that's that they telepathically warned him to watch out for the atomic breath, or if it's that they literally redirected him, moved him out of the way of the atomic breath. It doesn't really say. He just says they saved him a second time. Godzilla is then heavily bombed by the vultures and by all of the cannons on Mechagodzilla City until he's trapped in a rapidly cooling liquid nanometal. I love that. Weaponizing the whole city against Godzilla is so freaking cool. First, something that was seen in Destroy All Monsters, but really taken up a notch here. And here they analyze Godzilla, they sync their attack with the noise, they destroy his dorsal fin after the noise does that little drop point that it does where it restarts, which reactivates his shield. Every couple seconds the shield drops and has to regenerate. When the shield drops, they destroy the dorsal fin, effectively stopping the shield from regenerating, and then the EMP harpoons are fired. But without a second EMP harpoon in order to fire those final fatal blows into Godzilla, it only damages him. And so he stands there and starts irradiating heat as he converts all of that rampant electromagnetic waves inside of him into thermal energy. I love this, and it really doesn't make sense in the next movie. As Godzilla approaches meltdown here, he becomes Scarlet Godzilla Earth. I think that name was first come up with by GNA, and it is fantastic. It is stuck ever to this day. To gain higher resistance to the heat, the remaining Bilisolutans fuse with nanometal. Galagu tries to force the humans to fuse with nanometal in the vultures too in order to save them and keep them in combat, but they're having some resistance. It's explained here how close Godzilla Earth came to dying. Very close. The reason Godzilla Phileas dies, it turns out, is because he tried to use an atomic breath attack after being in so much pain. He was trying to kill the people that were hurting him. As a result, all of that electromagnetic energy inside of him built up and he exploded like an atomic bomb. And here, Godzilla Earth does not do that, instead choosing to try and sweat out the pain. If they can provoke Godzilla into another atomic breath attack, he will die and explode. So I wonder if they started shooting him sooner if it would have worked. Otherwise, he will be able to release enough heat to return to stability, the electromagnetic waves won't be as rampant inside of him, and then he can start to use his atomic breath again, and then he'll be able to heal. They can also fuse with the nanometal and become kamikaze pilots, basically flying straight into into the EMP harpoons, sending them further into Godzilla, damaging him again and causing him to react in a way that would make him explode. Yuko is able to sort of resist the nanometal as it starts to hurt her, and so she basically like forces it to try and stop resisting it as it's taking over, which causes her to pass out. Mephies then warns Haruo through a communication device that if he does this, if Haruo goes through with this plan and kills Godzilla, the Earth will be claimed by nanometal. Who knows how long that'll take? I'm sure they could have found a solution to stop it, but that's the fear, is that if Haruo goes through with this, the Earth will be consumed by nanometal. In reality, it's because Mephies specifically needs Haruo, because only a few select individuals across the galaxy can summon Ghidorah, and Haruo's strong will is one of those people. But then Mephies explains that if Haruo simply kills Galagu and destroys the base he's in, the nanometal will deactivate, and it won't consume Yuko entirely. Galagu warns that the only way to defeat a monster is to become one, and so Haruo is stuck between the decision. Is it worth killing Godzilla and potentially sacrificing humanity in the process, or is it worth allowing Godzilla to potentially destroy them anyways? On the one hand, you can ensure that Godzilla dies, on the other, you cannot assure that humanity can survive. But it seems more likely that humanity will die either way, so Haruo gives in and makes the tough decision with one final bit of telepathic encouragement from Mephies, and he rejects the nanometal, killing Galagu and Belubei in the process, and letting Godzilla reawaken, having sweated out enough of that rampant energy to go full thermonuclear mode, and Godzilla summons his atomic breath and melts Mechagodzilla City. As Godzilla wins, Haruo holds Yuko in his body, who now winds up in a coma because the nanometal was still fused with her enough to where when it was deactivated, she basically deactivates with it. In the end credits, the post-credit scene, we are treated to this wonderful little reverse sequence where Haruo's in agony and we wind up like reversing into all of these memories and all of this influence that Mephies has over him, basically showing that Haruo still doesn't really have free will. It's all Mephies pulling the strings, and we wind up back in the conversation in the cave where Mephies reveals the name of the monster that destroyed his planet. The monster, Ghidorah. And that is where we leave it for this one into the next movie. I think that this movie is super underrated. Like, I get it. It's low on spectacle, it's a slow pace, but I really think it's a fantastic slow burn. The last 30 minutes of this movie or so are some of the best in any of these movies. I think it's fantastically written stuff. The drama is peak. It's just really well done. And that's because overall, I know not a lot of people might agree with this. Maybe some people do, I don't know. I think the human story in this movie is fantastic. I think it is fantastically written with deep psychological debates, themes, and questions. Plus, it's got these wonderful setups and deep connections to the next film. Like all of this subtle manipulation that's going on with Haruo and Mephies. It's so good. The thing that holds this movie back is the kaiju story. It is deeply underwhelming, especially off the back of potentially having a Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla fight, and then for Mechagodzilla to not even activate in this movie, for him to just be a city. It is deeply underwhelming. And Godzilla is once again very underutilized, only showing up towards the end of the film and basically doing the exact same stuff he did in the last one. Although I will say, Scarlet Godzilla Earth is so freaking dope. Scarlet Godzilla Earth remains to this day my favorite version of the Burning Godzilla. It's my favorite version of that thermonuclear Godzilla. I think it is so cool. The animation is for me what holds this movie back the most, as to this day, while Polygon Pictures might have a pretty good handle on mechs and flying and explosions or whatever, I don't think they ever actually found out how to animate Godzilla. I think that's one of the bigger things that holds this whole series back, is I don't think Godzilla has a proper walk cycle. I don't think that Godzilla was designed in a way that he can move very well, and that's one of the reasons I think we see very little of him. I don't think they knew how to make Godzilla walk. I don't think they knew how to make Godzilla really look good in action, and to be honest, Godzilla Earth may look fantastic from like a very specific side angle, and maybe occasionally he looks pretty cool from the front, but overall, I actually think Godzilla Earth looks kind of dorky. I think that the design doesn't hold up as well from most angles. Some angles, again, I think it looks amazing, but most, I do not think so at all. I think Godzilla wound up being too bulky, too fat, and also those legs were too thin. I think there's a lot of things that hold that Godzilla design back, and I think that they never learned how to animate him, which is why all of the sequences with him kind of underwhelming. If they were better animated, it could be some truly stellar stuff, but instead we're treated to a lot of like really close-up shots of Godzilla, or zooming around his legs, or flying past him in a way that like he doesn't really get to shine ever, and the animation is overall what holds it back. Also, sometimes I'm into the art aesthetic of the CG animation and sometimes I just don't think it looks all that high quality. The music in this movie I think is good but not great. We've got Takayuki Hattori returning again to do the soundtrack, and he's continuing his music from the last movie. We get some heaters in here for sure. I really like some of that Bill Saluto technology music. I really love the Rappel theme that brings back in the military march from the last film, but this score is a lot slower than the last one, and I do think it's not as good. It's a little more atmospheric, and to me it doesn't live up to the last score. So I'd say the music is good but not great, which is kind of how I would describe this overall movie. Well, I think the script is fantastic. I don't think the movie itself is truly great, but I do think it's pretty good. I would give this film a 7.5 out of 10 on a Godzilla-Thon scale, which is to say an arbitrary rating that I give it in just whatever I'm feeling at the moment when I write the score. I do really enjoy rewatching this film, but it is not one I return to a ton, mostly due to the slow pacing and due to the fact that it comes in the middle of a trilogy and it would be weird to just jump into this one. And I really do think Monster Planet is a harder barrier of entry for me than this one because it has a lot less interesting themes to it. It's a lot less interesting drama in that last film. So I will give 2018's Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's pretty solid. I have absolutely no clue what I rated Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, but I do feel I probably gave this movie a much more positive review than I did back in the day, and I probably gave this movie a much more positive review than most of the internet. Even to this day, this movie has very few fans. But I'm one of them, and I will always continue to sing the praise of the things the anime trilogy does well, while acknowledging that, yeah, I think the animation holds it back, the slow pacing holds it back, the music's not always my favorite, but some of it's pretty awesome, and of course, the lack of action does hold this series back. So I'll always acknowledge the flaws, but I want to be the cheerleader for these movies because somebody's gotta be, and I really do think that there's a lot of wonderful elements to these movies that, especially after the trilogy concluded with the full arc, I think there's a lot to love here, you know. With the third installment, I do think it all comes together in a really compelling way. But what do you think of Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm sure that is a very controversial question. I'd love to hear, so comment down below and let me know. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It's just through the support of the patrons that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I cannot wait to jump into Godzilla the Planet Eater next week. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man, out. What's up, everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we are going to be doing the 37th episode of Godzilla-Thon. Welcome back to Godzilla-Thon. It is time to continue our journey through the Godzilla franchise, and today we're talking about Godzilla the Planet Eater, the 2018 cap to the Godzilla Anime Trilogy. This is where it all ends. It's all been building to this, and boy, I can remember we were so excited, tensions were so high, so many people thought that this movie was gonna finally deliver on the monster brawl potential of the anime format. Like, I remember I used to think Mechagodzilla was gonna rise out of the remains of Mechagodzilla City, and the movie would begin with this epic battle between Godzilla and Mechagodzilla, and then eventually King Ghidorah would get involved, and I was hoping that all three of them would die and that they would all be wiped out in the process, and that is not what happens at all. This movie continues the trend of the Godzilla anime series by being an incredibly retrospective and character-driven drama, and really I think I described it best back in the day by stating these are not action movies, these are character dramas set in a world where Godzilla exists. That's the driving hook at the end of the day, and to be honest with you, this movie comes so late into the Godzilla franchise. This is the 34th Godzilla movie, and by this point we're 64 years in. This is 64 years into Godzilla's history. To be honest with you, I'm so glad that it did not continue down the path that many people thought it was gonna go down. I love how different this movie is, and I know that this whole series is so divisive, and I know that there are some people who really appreciate these anime movies, but most people do not. I get it, and again, just like I said in the last video, A City on the Edge of Battle, I totally get why. But you guys, I love this movie. I think it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite Godzilla movies. I don't know where it lands in the list. At some point I'll have to rank these things. I honestly do not know where it lands in my list of Godzilla movies, but as of recently, it's one of my favorite Godzilla movies. It's certainly one of my favorites that's come out in the new modern era ever since 2014 brought things back. And the thing that I love the most about it is how different it is, how much risk it takes, and ultimately at the end of the day, it's one one of the most inspirational Godzilla movies to me that's come out lately, because if I, someday I want to be a writer and director of movies, and fingers crossed that someday I can tell a Godzilla story. I love to write Godzilla stories. I love to direct Godzilla stories. I have so many that I want to tell, and I'll say Godzilla the Planet Eater has been a big inspiration to me, and there's a noticeable shift in my writing before and after Godzilla the Planet Eater in the types of ideas that I'm exploring, the boundaries that I'm pushing, and I'm taking a lot of inspiration from Godzilla the Planet Eater in a lot of ways. And the reason for that is it's the Godzilla movie that's come out recently that I think has most successfully done the most different, in that it's really swinging for the fences with its ideas. It's not trying to follow in the footsteps of other Godzilla movies, but pave its own path forward, and I couldn't love it more for that. I loved Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Same with Godzilla Minus One. Godzilla Minus One's a bit of a different exception because Godzilla Minus One touches on so many of the ideas I've always wanted to see done in a Godzilla movie. Godzilla King of the Monsters, it was a great movie. I love the film, but I can't say it's a particularly inspiring Godzilla movie for me. If I were to make a Godzilla movie, I'm not sure how much inspiration I'm taking from Godzilla King of the Monsters, because that movie is really a homage to the things that's come before. In a similar way Godzilla Minus One is, but Godzilla Minus One, I'll get there in Godzilla-Thon. It perfected everything it was going for. I love that movie. But this movie, Godzilla the Planet Eater, I think it's got a lot going for it, man. I think it really, really does. It really does. Directed by Kobun Shizuno and Hiroyuki Shishida, this is the 34th film in the Godzilla series and the first proper Godzilla trilogy. It now marks the first proper Godzilla trilogy. Of course, there's been Godzilla franchise series, the Showa series, the Heisei series, the Millennium series that have made it past 3 films for sure. None of those feel like proper trilogies. The closest we got outside of this was that little Showa trilogy, Mothra versus Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and Invasion of Astro Monster. That's probably the closest we get. We kind of get a Son of Godzilla trilogy going in the Showa series as well, with Son of Godzilla, Destroy All Monsters, and then All Monsters Attack, but that's a very broken trilogy considering one of them is not even canon. Point is, this is the first proper Godzilla trilogy being completed here, and I love it. It really, really, really does a great job of developing the world naturally and in interesting ways, developing the immediate consequences of the other movies in ways that I'm always begging for the Monsterverse to do. The Monsterverse pretended that it was going to go down the trilogy route and then didn't, and none of those movies have felt like fully organic developments of the world and consequences of the previous films in the way that this film does. This movie was initially released on November 3rd. That's when the first premiere happened. Of course, Godzilla Day, Godzilla's birthday, but the full release date in Japan was November 8th, 2018. This was 6 months after Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, and just a couple months later, it was released internationally on Netflix on January 9th, 2019. And I gotta say, the Godzilla Planet Eater era, it coincides with the King of the Monsters era. Obviously, it was the same time period. Really, 2018, mid 2018, from like SDCC onward until the release of Godzilla King of the Monsters, it truly kind of marked the high point of my life, just in terms of all this stuff going on was so fun. I was having the most fun on the channel back then. The channel was doing better back then than it ever has since. That's the peak of the channel. It was the peak of the culture on this channel. It was the most fun I had making videos. It was also new and exciting as well. And beyond that, that was also just a really fun time personally, That's when I met some of my best friends of all time. That's when I ended high school with some of my other best friends. It was just a very exciting period. Lots of big changes. I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie. I have a lot of nostalgia for the soundtrack of this movie. I remember just listening to the Godzilla the Planet Eater soundtrack when I was down in my feelings, sitting outside in the cold breeze of the night some nights, just appreciating the music of this movie. Like, I have a really deep connection for this film. So the movie opens up, let's just get into it. The movie opens up with an ominous kind of version of Mephi's theme, which has really become the theme of this movie. It was actually kind of one of my critiques of this film in the time period where this movie came out, and I kind of felt like the soundtrack was so reliant on the Exif motif that it didn't have a lot else going for it, but boy, do I disagree with that. And by the way, I did not give enough credit to Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle in the last video either. While I agree that Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle soundtrack isn't as good as Godzilla Monster Planet soundtrack, I still think that one's probably my favorite of the trilogy. I really like the music overall. I've really grown on Takayuki Hattori's style. Back in the day, I was a little upset that it wasn't Michiru Oshima or someone else, but nowadays I like what Takayuki Hattori delivered, and I gotta say, I did not give enough credit to Agonizing Decision and Decision at the End for being two of the best songs ever written in the Godzilla franchise. They play at the end of City on the Edge of Battle. Those motifs are brought brought back into this film. There's so much wonderful reworking of music in this movie. I think they're brought in Ruin and Salvation. So freaking cool. So I just wanted to say that up top that, yeah, I've really grown on the soundtrack for this movie and all the trilogy overall, and I did not give enough credit in the last video for how wonderful I think the soundtrack of City on the Edge of Battle actually is. Anyways, the movie kind of opens right where the post-credit scene left off, with not a recap of the post-credit scene or a retelling of it, but a very similarly portrayed scene. It's stylistically very similar, and we get that very ominous version of Mephi's theme, implying that the Exif have been up to no good all this time, and in this we learn a lot of lore. We learned that the Exif have watched humanity for years, long before the dawn of civilization. They've been tuning into planet Earth, observing our history, and compelling us down a path that would eventually lead to the birth of someone that the humans could all follow. They needed a human to unite humanity under the name of God, because the humans would never truly accept the word of God as is out of fear of him, and so they needed a human to essentially bring them to the point where they can summon Ghidorah. All of it has been for the purpose of destroying humanity. Not only was Haruo groomed for extinction, but all of humanity was. We were essentially, in this timeline, humanity was compelled down a path of creating weapons that would eventually result in Godzilla's birth, all for the purpose of creating a monster for Ghidorah to eat. And then at the same time, Mephi's picks Haruo and grooms him for his entire life to lead humanity to its extinction, while promising him that his destiny is to save humanity. It's so twisted and messed up, and in a way it backfires, because it's this person, Haruo, picking him because of his strong will and desire to protect other humans, that backfires, because ultimately Haruo fulfills the prophecy, rejecting Mephi's and saving all of humanity through sacrificing himself. It's great. I love it. I truly think it's so fantastically written. If you ever saw my Godzilla most disturbing moments video I made, I did a list of some of the most disturbing moments in Godzilla movies, and I put the entire premise of this movie on that list. The premise that Mephi's has been grooming a child since he was like 8 years old for the purpose of building him up as a hero to save humanity, with the underlying motivation of accidentally leading him, or without his knowledge, to destroying almost all of human civilization. It's so messed up. I feel so bad for Haruo. He's one of my favorite characters in the Godzilla series, as is Mephi's, who solidifies himself in this movie as perhaps my favorite villain in the entire Godzilla franchise. I think he's so twisted and fantastic, and I love his calm demeanor. I freaking love the English cast for this movie. I think that Mephi's voice actor just kills it. The Japanese voice actor does a great job as well. It's amazing. I love that character. Anyways, Mephi's waited for a situation to birth a person who could unite humanity behind one single cause, so that he could hijack that person's mission to get all of humanity involuntarily led straight to Ghidorah, to praising Ghidorah, who would eventually kill them all. He waited for Haruo. Mechagodzilla City is nothing more than a mere crater. It's completely melted down. There's no Mechagodzilla to rise from it to take on Godzilla. And this sleepy jerk Godzilla, after sleeping for thousands of years, immediately hibernates again inside of this, which I actually appreciate here, because we find out he's actually letting his electromagnetic waves inside stabilize. You know, obviously he went through a lot in the last movie. He's letting those waves stabilize. He's trying to basically rebuild his strength again after what he went through in the last film, and I do appreciate that. It's a much better explanation for why Godzilla's sleeping here than in the last movie, where he just is asleep just because the plot needs him out of the way for a while. So it turns out Godzilla, it barely does anything before he needs to sleep, Shin Godzilla style. I guess it's maybe realistic, but it is disappointing. As Godzilla hibernates, Martin theorizes that in some ways humanity's progress seemed only to be in the favor of eventually bringing Godzilla, the ultimate life form, to life. In some ways, he is the planet's biggest protector. I think that this is double-faced, because on the one side, it seems that the Exif literally led humanity down the path of creating Godzilla with the desire of feeding him to Ghidorah. On the other hand, I also think it plays into the overall themes of the trilogy about balancing nature in a way that the MonsterVerse is never fully committed to, where Godzilla is essentially portrayed as nature's balance regardless of morality, you know? Also, I just want to say, I never noticed Godzilla's spine is still visibly destroyed in this sequence. He's still healing from the attack in the last movie. That's great continuity. Up on the Artrum, we kind of follow a similar plot structure the first act of this movie as we do in the last film. So up on the Artrum, we cut back to them. The data from Mechagodzilla City is delivered. They listen to it all, and Doolittle, the leader of the Bilisaludo, who I never learned his name until right now, wants to kill Haruo. He wants Haruo dead. But Hamamoto defends Haruo. Hamamoto was also Haruo's biggest critic. He's one of the leaders of the human faction on this ship. If not, he's the representative for the human faction, as the captain is, supposed to represent all factions. And he finally sides with Haruo, without any debate. He's siding with Haruo here. He finally, in a way, has proved in this moment that Haruo did succeed in his goal of unifying all of humanity, which is a big uh-oh, because that's exactly what the Exif wanted. Doolittle then explains that Mechagodzilla City would have birthed a brand new era that led to the Bilisaludo leading humanity into a prosperous new age of technological revolution, and so it seems Mephies was telling the truth the whole time, and the Bilisaludo really were planning on destroying the planet in the purpose of building nanometal. Martin then discovers Yuko on Earth. She is brain dead, completely brain dead, but her heart is still beating, keeping her alive only because of the nanometal. The nanometal is keeping her alive, and she's keeping the nanometal alive. This is a plotline I didn't fully understand back in the day when this movie came out, that she is dead. She's definitively dead. Her heart is beating, but Yuko is dead as a person. I always thought it was kind of twisted that Yuko was stuck in a coma and Haruo essentially kills her at the end of the movie, but that's not the case. She's literally dead. There's nothing for Haruo to destroy other than, I guess, her heart, but there is no brain functioning. She's not in a coma. She's not in a dream. She's dead. Martin then reveals that Haruo's compassion to not abandon Yuko is what cost them the battle, and that if he had condemned her to death and stopped Godzilla, he would have become a monster, both mentally and physically. Only a monster can defeat a monster. This is a line that I think is a little odd, because Mephies and Martin kind of come to this realization together, but it shows that the script on the English cut is a little weaker than the Japanese script. In the Japanese script, Martin is like, oh, so in a weird way, we're actually agreeing with the Bilisaludo and Galagu, who almost said exactly that in the last movie, whereas in the English cut, he says, that's the argument, which is paradoxical, but he never explains what the paradox is. In the Japanese version, the paradox is that they are agreeing with the Bilisaludo, and yet they killed the Bilisaludo for making that argument. That's the paradox. In a way, they agree with the Bilisaludo, but they disagree with the Bilisaludo's methods. Essentially, Martin's realizing that the only way to defeat Godzilla is with a monster of their own, and they don't want to turn themselves into monsters in the process. But I do just want to say that I'm using that as an example to say that I do think the English script is a little worse and also creates some ambiguity in places that got very confusing, especially for me the first couple times I saw this movie, where I was like, what the heck is going on? And as we'll talk about, there is only one plot line in this movie that I truly think is not well written. To this day, I think there's a big problem with it, and it revolves around those damn anime thoughts, and I'll get there in a bit. Mephies then spins this whole conversation on Haruo's survival and rejection of the nanometal as a miracle. Adam then spreads the gospel, jumping in here, and convinces the other humans to join the Exif religion. Mephies gets the humans to worship Haruo for saving them from Mechagodzilla, while at the same time becoming the vessel for the voice of Haruo. They will never listen to Haruo himself, only Mephies. Miyana then stops Mephies from entering Mothra's temple. Martin then recovers Haruo's vulture, but with Mechagodzilla City destroyed, I guess as it was being destroyed, it sent out a stopping signal and locked up the vulture so that it won't turn on anymore, so they can't use it. Mephies then spins the rejection of nanometal by other survivors as a sign that God chose those specific survivors because they were kind of on the line of the Exif religion, and if you don't have faith in the Exif religion, you probably died in Mechagodzilla City, you got eaten by the nanometal, and that pretty much convinces everybody to have faith in him. They all just are like, yeah, that's pretty convincing evidence right there. Martin reveals secretly to Haruo that that's actually not the case at all. It was everybody who had medical treatment from the Hautua that survived due to the golden dust resisting the nanometal. But as Martin explains, everybody is so deep in the Exif cult that by revealing this information, it could look like an act of rebellion or sacrilege, going against the religion itself rather than trying to help spread information, which I think is a very, very clever critique on religion. And I think this whole movie has a very clever critique on religion and why people in religious power, the type of manipulation that can occur where they're trying to gain more power through misleading or misrepresenting events to gain their own political means, I think it's very, very clever. Mephies then reveals to Haruo privately that he's well aware that it was the Hautua medicine. He already knows this, but he simply needed to unite all of humanity behind a single cause. He wanted to unite all of the human hearts in the cause so that they can battle Godzilla one final time. Mephies explains that his god will defeat Godzilla, and Haruo doesn't need to fear anything. It's not magic or the occult, it's simply technology that humans can't comprehend yet. It's so advanced that it seems like magic, but the Exif proved long ago the existence of their god through mathematical calculations, and through these Gamatron calculations, they've actually found a way to contact beings on higher dimensions, one of those beings being their god, and this god will defeat Godzilla. This is the god the Exif worship and rely on, and this is the god they've been communicating with throughout the last movie. Ghidorah wants them to succeed because he wants to eat. I don't know why they need all of the hearts of humans united in this cause. I don't know what that is. I don't know why they need someone like Haruo to specifically give praise to Ghidorah, but maybe that's Ghidorah. Maybe that's just a Ghidorah thing. Maybe that's part of his ego. Maybe Ghidorah himself has some type of ego where he won't step in unless he gets the praise, or maybe people taste better if they're praising him. I don't know. I don't know what type of motivations he has. He's a higher dimensional being. It's kind of hard to understand higher dimensional beings, and I'm totally okay with that. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really cool, and I love that Haruo's reaction is basically like, you mean to tell me your god could have saved us this whole time? Then why didn't he? And he gets all mad and is like, have you just been letting us die just for the point of what? I think it's a great argument that Haruo rebuttals with. If your god could stop tragedy, why doesn't he? And then Mephies' answer is basically like, because I wanted you specifically to suffer, because I want to hear you praise him. I want you to praise Ghidorah. Which again, a very, very clever critique on real religion. I think it's good stuff. I think it's really, really well-developed themes that are given a lot of time to unpack. I think it's really, really well handled. It's also a touchy subject. I know some people could get very offended hearing that stuff, but that's just part of the discussion this movie's trying to have. If you're willing to engage in this movie discussion respectfully, that's what the point is to get you to think a little more critically. I don't know, I love it. I think it's great. As I said, it turns out Mephies has been waiting for Haruo to basically become so helpless that his hatred for Godzilla overcomes his doubt about God. He needs Haruo to believe in Ghidorah, because if he believes in him and he himself asks for Ghidorah, summons him, his voice is so strong it transcends dimensions. We get a little bit of that at the end, that Haruo's hatred burns so strong that Ghidorah is aware of him from the higher dimension. But yeah, that's basically the point, is that he needs Haruo to suffer enough until Haruo gives in. When that happens, Haruo's passion will be so strong that he can stand at the altar and welcome God into this world so that he can take shape in our reality officially. Back up in space, until Haruo is held accountable, the Bilisaludo actually hold a rebellion, taking over the engine room and killing power to the Archrum. They kill power to its engine and strand it in orbit so that they can neither leave Earth nor help. They need to get Haruo, and they need to get him quick. Martin then catches up to Haruo, explaining that he's more of a symbol now. People will worship him, but will never listen to anything he says, only Mephies. Martin then comes up with a plan to have Haruo disappear until tensions on the Archrum settle, and so that Mephies can't continue to use him as an altarpiece. This is where it gets tricky. Miana the real one, takes Haruo to safety. This will slow everything. It'll slow Mephies' plan, it'll slow things in space, maybe they can come to a compromise saying Haruo ran away and so there's no point in fighting, or whatever. And so Haruo goes along with it. He and Miana escape to her hut. Haruo explains to Miana that he's depressed that he didn't kill Godzilla when he had the chance right in front of him, but even more so, he's depressed to find out that humans are still fighting and will never truly unite for justice or for the right thing. Miana explains that that's not how that works. It's not a matter of winning or losing in a battle with Godzilla, it's a matter of living and dying, and it's a matter of perspective. From her perspective, he's already won because he survived the fight with Godzilla, and in order to truly succeed in life, you have to reproduce. You have to survive and pass your genes on so that a part of you will always live on. It's in complete contrast with Mephies' perspective, which is that because the universe is finite and resources will end eventually, the only way to truly achieve a meaningful existence is to sacrifice yourself to a being that can live on beyond the end of the universe. And Miana's here to tell you that's not the case at all. You don't need to survive forever. You just should have a legacy worth living, and to have a legacy worth winning, you should bone her. She tries to bone Haruo. She gets naked in front of him. Boy, was it strange for me to watch that for the first time. I don't know why I had such a visceral reaction to this plot line, but I did not like it. I did not want it in this movie. One reason it might have thrown me off so much is because this is just not something that happens in most Godzilla movies, and if you look back on it, the Japanese media in general, at least within the Kaiju Eiga, specifically within the Godzilla series, is very, very conservative about what it shows. The closest we typically get to people even kissing in Godzilla movies is like Ogata grabbing Emiko's shoulders and giving her shoulder shoulders are squeezed back in the 54 film. We just don't see physical intimacy in Godzilla films a lot. I can think of like maybe an occasion in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, but the people die immediately afterward. Other than that, I guess the closest we get in the US films, and specifically that scene with Ford and Al Brody in Godzilla 2014. But I just feel it's important to point out that my boy Haruo is the first person to bang someone else in a Godzilla movie. Dude's the first Godzilla protagonist to get laid, and in fact, the only, to my knowledge, character who bones someone else during the events of a Godzilla movie. I can't think of anybody else who does. Maybe my knowledge is like a little limited here and I'm just not remembering that there's another scene out there where something like this happens, but I'm pretty sure Haruo's the only person who gets to bang someone else in a Godzilla movie, which is maybe a reason why it threw me off so much, because it just felt like it came out of nowhere in this franchise. Unfortunately for her, despite the fact that she's the twin who has all of the chemistry with Haruo, and she's also equally as attractive as her sister, she is rejected outright. Haruo's like, no thank you, not interested. It's so silly. I don't know why they do the twist they do here in a second. Anyway, so she's downright rejected, and she leaves Haruo in the hut alone, where she hears a noise that draws her attention. The Exif have used the tension on the ship to lead a mass prayer for prosperity. They want all the tensions to reside. They use this political situation going on to gain more religious followers, and that's why they've allowed this political tension to grow. Again, very clever critiques. Pretty cynical, but still very well written. Mephes and Indaruf, I don't know how to say his name, the leader of the XF, telepathically discuss over space, probably using those Gamatron crystals, but telepathically discuss how hard it's been getting to this point. Indaruf explains that his side has actually gone relatively easy and is all ready, but Mephes is like, I'm sorry, I still need more time. Haruo still has defiance in him, and final suffering is needed to get him ready. Miyana hears Ghidorah's beady 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 and goes to investigate. In the process, she overhears the telepathic conversation as the Hautua are also telepathic, and Mephes picks up on the fact that someone's spying on him and demands she comes out. Meanwhile, Haruo wakes up in a scene that I was so confused about what's happening. We see one of the twins start to undress Haruo. This, I thought, partially was a flashback to how Haruo got undressed before waking up in Godzilla Monster Planet's post-credit scene. Like, we're seeing that one of the twins has found out how to take his suit off in the past, so she's already taken it off. So now, we're seeing the flashback of that, and Haruo's just sleeping, but that's not what's happening. Despite the fact that we flash back to that scene, the scene of him being undressed doesn't have the flashback filter on it, and it's also directly cut with the scene of him waking up. The shots are the same of him waking up. Miyana shows up. Miyana tries to bang Haruo and leaves. Miyana shows up and starts to undress him. To this day, what is she doing? Because the Japanese dialogue, she explicitly says she fears Haruo is gonna lose, so she starts to undress him and she's gonna make him win by connecting life. What was she gonna do if he didn't wake up? That's my big question, because boy, I'll tell you what I thought had already happened back when this movie came out. I thought she had already done the connecting of life. I was so upset with that plotline for being in this movie. Luckily, she doesn't. That's not what happens. She did not connect life with Haruo while he was asleep, but she was certainly undressing him while he was asleep. This scene is the only scene I think is not well written. I mean, this plotline, I should say, is not well written. Haruo has no chemistry with Mina. He has no chemistry with Mina. All of his chemistry was with Miyana the nice one, the one he spent all of City on the Edge of Battle with, the one who clearly cares for him more, and the one who, after this scene, he will continue to spend more time with. After this scene, Haruo is more friendly to Miyana than Mina, even though Mina's gonna be the one carrying his baby. And in the final end of the movie, it's Miyana who shows Haruo spring, and it's Miyana who Haruo has his final conversation and goodbye with before taking his own life. Not Mina, the one carrying his child. We barely get any development for Mina beyond the fact that she was angry but is now very excited to bone Haruo. She's not even excited about it as much as she's like, I think that this should happen. I don't understand why they did the plot twist. If it were me, I would have written it so that Mina is the one who goes to Haruo. She's the one who Haruo is going to be taken to safety with. She tries to bang Haruo and is rejected. She leaves and is captured by Mephes and confronts him because she's upset that he's, gonna summon Ghidorah. She's captured captured and is used as an altarpiece. Miyana shows up and is like, Haruo, I was worried you were gonna die. And then they bone. Then she's the one who gets pregnant. She aids Haruo for the rest of the movie, saves his life, saves him during the big Ghidorah sequence. And then in the end, it's her and Haruo fulfilling the same roles. She's just pregnant during it, where she shows him spring. She has the final goodbye with him, and then he ends his life. I don't know why they switch it. My only guess is that the writers knew that after Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, we would identify with more and like Miyana more than Mina. So in order to get us more emotionally invested in saving the one that's captured by Mephies, it had to be Miyana, and so Mina is the one that Haruo bangs and gets pregnant? I don't think that works at all. And let me tell you, this plot twist is so confusing that if you go check the wikis, the actual Wikipedia page will give you one explanation, Wikizilla will give you another explanation, and Gojipedia presents you with a third explanation for this plotline. One of the explanations is that Haruo spends some time with Miyana, Miyana leaves, Mina shows up, and they bang. It was Mina who first saves Haruo from the wreckage and undresses him. When he wakes up, it's Miyana in the hut, and so he spends sitting on the edge of battle with Miyana. That's what the Wikipedia will tell you, and that's what I'm inclined to believe. Mina saves Haruo off screen. When he wakes up, he's probably with Mina in the post-credit scene. It is Miyana who he wakes up with in the city on the edge of battle and spends the movie with, and now Mina returns and undresses him. I don't remember if it's the Wikizilla or the Gojipedia, but one of them believes that it's Miyana who saves Haruo. In Godzilla Monster Planet, Miyana undresses Haruo in Godzilla Monster Planet. She's then the one he wakes up with in Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, and he spends the movie with her. Then with Godzilla the Planet Eater, Mina shows up pretending to be Miyana. Mina is the one who's protecting Haruo, but she's claiming to be Miyana. She can't figure out how to undress his shirt because she's never done that before. That was her sister who did that. She leaves the hut, comes back into the hut, and then Haruo wakes up, and then they bone after he's already rejected her because he figures out she was pretending to be the other sister. That's actually a little bit more of the explanation I thought happened when this movie came out. I believe that's the explanation on the Gojipedia. The explanation on the Wikizilla is a little different. That whole plotline is so convoluted. I don't appreciate that plot twist. I don't think it works from a writer's standpoint because the two characters have no chemistry. Haruo has no chemistry with Mina. He has chemistry with Miyana, and I don't think it works from the perspective of it's genuinely confusing why they do that twist. So anyways, Haruo realizes that because the one who undressed him and saved his life was originally able to get him undressed, but Miyana couldn't figure it out, that means that the new twin must be Mina because she undresses him. I guess that's how he figures it out. Although, again, that wiki, there's another explanation that says that the shot of Haruo getting undressed was a flashback to the events of the post-credit scene of Planet of the Monsters, and that he himself is the one who undresses, and that he's with Mina the whole time in this movie, and Miyana was the one who could successfully undress him in the last films. I'm inclined to believe the Wikipedia is the one that has the proper explanation. Mina is the one who saves him off screen and is the one who shows up here now after he rejected Miyana. And the voice acting would support that theory. After coming to this realization, Miyana couldn't get him undressed, and that means that Mina is the one currently with him. She explains that she's scared. She's scared that he's gonna die, and he says, I'm scared too. And then they bang. They bang for, I don't know why. They just bang. They do. Why wouldn't he bang the other sister? Why would he bang this one? I don't know. Maybe he was just sleepy. Maybe he needed a nap and it didn't matter which sister was with him when he woke up. I don't know. I also saw some people getting upset that is that cheating on Yuko? First of all, Yuko's dead. Secondly, he never reciprocated with Yuko. She kissed him. He did not kiss her. Like I said, Miyana then goes and confronts Mephies, who reveals that he kept his telepathy a secret the whole time so that he could gain the trust of the humans in the Villa Saludo, but that ultimately you don't really need telepathy to understand races like that because they wear their emotions on their sleeve. And she reveals that she actually figured out his secret a long time ago, and he's very impressed by that. He's like, wow, I really underestimated you guys. You guys are a lot smarter than I thought, and you've really mastered telepathy. She explains that it's because he was always so quiet, and he wouldn't communicate even using his mind. Therefore, it's a trait he had to develop only through the ability to speak through his mind in the first place. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to keep his thoughts quiet for so long. Mephies then forces Miyana onto the ground and forces her to pray to the golden demise, or the Golden Death, as Ghidorah's silhouette appears with all three heads connected to the wings. Supposedly, Ghidorah originally exists in a form that resembles more or less the Ghidorah we know and love. He looks a little like a banana in the movie monster series, but there is a Ghidorah out there in the other dimensions that looks more like the Ghidorahs we know, but that Ghidorah never takes shape in this movie. We only ever see its silhouette, and I'm fine with that. I know a lot of people don't like the Void Ghidorah heads. I was a little resistant to them too because they're such a radically different interpretation of the character, but I'll say, with the variants of Ghidorah out there, Death Ghidorah, there's, I think, Grand King Ghidorah, there's Kaiser Ghidorah. Void Ghidorah is the one that has the most unique portrayal. It's the one that feels the most earned. It's also the one that I think is the most interesting, and overall, hot take. Despite the fact that the design isn't my favorite Ghidorah is the one in Godzilla King of the Monsters. This Ghidorah has my favorite characterization and portrayal. It's maybe not even characterization, because again, I really like the characterization of the one in King of the Monsters, but this one has my favorite portrayal overall. The concepts at play here are amazing. Ghidorah is incredible. I love him. And I love the silhouettes too. I love that the silhouettes can attack and freak people out and even harm them later on. Her scream, she screams out in fear, wanting something to save her, and it's Godzilla, the supposedly destroyer himself, who awakens hearing this. Haruo then has a dream that Mephies takes him to this sacred fountain where he reveals that without the presence of humanity, Godzilla stops being a monster and simply becomes a natural creature. Godzilla's only Godzilla because humans give him the title of monster. It's only through this human perception and judgment of Godzilla and his actions that he's viewed as evil. Haruo has single-handedly scared all humans and ensured that they all view Godzilla with the same judgment that he does, and it was Haruo who ensured Godzilla officially became a monster for the new generation. Again, all sowing the seeds for why Haruo makes the decision to end his life later, as he's already inspired Yuko and led her to her death. He's inspired so many countless other people to lead them to their deaths at this point, and unfortunately, the symbol of himself is about to lead all of the rest of these people to their deaths, and so at the end of the movie, he takes his own life to prevent that from happening to the Hautua. Haruo then discovers Miyana in Mephi's sacrificial bowl and wakes up, with Mina revealing she felt it too. She could feel Miyana crying the word Ghidorah, and that's when Haruo puts the pieces that this really did happen together and goes to confront him. Mephies then holds a banquet, and this is a great scene, a really scary scene, one of the scariest in the Godzilla series, as Mephies sacrifices nearly every one of the surviving humans to Ghidorah, as Ghidorah enters our dimension as nothing more than a shadow, able to eat through the shadow of other people, which is I love that it goes with that multi-dimensional theory, and it kind of plays into what Godzilla Singular Point talks about with archetype, where if we are a lower dimension than Ghidorah, if you hold a Rubik's Cube up and you can only see its shadow, the Rubik's Cube looks like a square. The idea that shadows are representing a lower dimension, and here Ghidorah literally enters our dimension through a shadow, I think is so freaking cool, dude. I love it. Indoraph does something similar in space, holding a sermon of his own, as Mephies uses his crystal to allow their prayers to cross dimensions into Ghidorah's dimension. As the humans devote themselves to Ghidorah, to becoming soup for Ghidorah, basically Mephies' whole explanation here is, when you drink soup, it doesn't get destroyed. It's not destroyed. It doesn't end. The soup doesn't cease to exist. It becomes a part of you, and you live on with that soup inside of you, and the soup then eventually breaks down and becomes fuel for you, and it will become energy for you, and you become part of its life force. You couldn't live without the soup, and that's what they need to do to Ghidorah, is fuel Ghidorah. They will become food for Ghidorah so that they can become a part of him, because he exists in eternity, and the universe does not. So in order to ensure that their life force has a meaning and an existence beyond eternity, they have to feed it to this higher dimensional creature. A very interesting metaphor and take on religion. Essentially devoting yourself to being, kind of in a way, in this movie, at least this movie's making the argument, you're devoting yourself to essentially serve a higher power's purpose that doesn't ultimately benefit you the way that you're being told it will benefit you, again, according to this movie, but then at least you'll get to live on in eternity. And it kind of downplays the entire purpose of existing in the first place. Like, the only point of existing is to get to the afterlife. That's the only point, is to get to the point where your soul can live on in the afterlife, even though your soul will be nothing but soup in a big bowl of other soup where all the other souls are already mixed in. That's the only purpose of living, is just for that? Well, then what's the whole point of sticking around in the first place until you get to that point? This movie makes the argument the whole point's the living part, not the dying part. That's the whole point of this movie. The whole point is that you're supposed to realize the value in life is the part where you're alive. That's the value. It's the part where you're here on this planet and can make meaningful connections with others. You don't have to live in immortality to achieve happiness. You have to pass down a legacy onto a family. That's the point this movie's making. A singularity opens up in space, and ahead of Ghidorah exits the void swimming in infinity. I freaking love the way that Ghidorah swims in basically the infinity symbol. It's not as obvious as that, but Ghidorah swims in infinity. He will live on forever, and he travels through infinite time and space. It's so cool. He distorts gravity and space-time in the process, revealing that the Artrum will die before it actually happens. They find out that it's going to explode and that they're all already dead because he's distorting gravity and time. So cool. I love it. I also love that the lightning comes off of his body. Good spin on the traditional Ghidorah lightning beams. The only reading the ship can get on Ghidorah is his gravitational distortion, and other than that, it's claiming that Ghidorah doesn't exist at all. That's the only force that affects him, which makes sense if you go with the theory that the fourth dimension is time itself. On a plane of gravity where gravity can warp time, time is the fourth dimension, and so Ghidorah is a higher dimensional being, and therefore he would warp gravity and time. Although seen with the naked eye, Ghidorah is not technically in our dimension. He's in a higher dimension, and we're only basically viewing his shadow if you view it through the singular point lens, which is the scientifically accurate lens to view higher dimensions. We're seeing the shadow of Ghidorah. That's why we never see all of his body at once in a way. Ghidorah is technically invisible to technology as a result. Ghidorah then constricts the ship like a snake, causing such intense gravitational strain that it explodes at different times. Explosions ring out at different times, like the ship is exploding in a really drawn out, agonizing end. It's very cool. And then after destroying the Artrum, golden ripples swallow the earth as Ghidorah descends upon us. So good. This whole sequence is so cool. The how to unite for defense as 3 black holes open up in the sky. Maina points out to Haruo that a distant mountain is where Mephi's altar is, and so Haruo's off. A lightning storm erupts as Godzilla responds, recharged and healed and ready for battle. Godzilla leaves Mount Fuji with the only urgency we ever see Godzilla Earth display, and then confronts Ghidorah, who lowers his head onto Earth and warps Godzilla's atomic breath in the process. Again, the only effect you can actually have on Ghidorah is just affecting the gravity around him, because that's the thing he's primarily warping in our time. I love that. Godzilla's beam curves through Ghidorah. It completely just phases through him, like Ghidorah is completely intangible to it, but it warps the beam's trajectory. And then when Godzilla tries to do it again, Ghidorah catches the beam in his mouth and redirects it to the ground, causing an earthquake. It's so cool. I wish Ghidorah had redirected it at Godzilla himself. That would have been awesome. Ghidorah is described as living space-time multiple times during this scene. Super cool. And he's using gravity to redirect Godzilla's heat-based attack. Very cool that Ghidorah's gravity is so strong it can even redirect light and heat. It's kind of like Ghidorah is a living black hole in a way. While Godzilla fails to strike Ghidorah, Ghidorah bites Godzilla successfully, choosing what and when to interact with our dimension. Ghidorah slowly starts sucking the life out of Godzilla. He slowly starts sucking the electromagnetic waves inside of Godzilla, keeping him alive and sustaining his life force out, draining him of power. The other heads of Ghidorah then appear and start to speed up the process, biting into Godzilla and wrapping around him and draining his energy. Ghidorah is officially consuming Godzilla as the Planet Eater. He's eating Godzilla. Haruo discovers Mephi's has Miana strapped to an altar. He then confronts him in a scene that I think is fantastic. I love the speech Mephi's gives here, and we learn that the Exif have traveled watching civilizations grow after civilizations grow, and all the time they wind up creating ultimate life forms, these monsters, and in this case Godzilla is humanity's monster. It's when this happens that they summon King Ghidorah to eat that monster, saying that it's basically the fruit that the planet produces, and once Ghidorah eats that life form, he'll then consume the entire planet. Basically, the Exif we meet were spared after they learned on their planet that the universe isn't infinite, it's finite, its resources finite. Thanos would love that. All life in the universe will eventually end in nothingness, and so in order to stop it from being a meaningless existence, as that's how they view it, they view the finite end of the universe as meaningless, whereas the Hautua view it as an even more rewarding thing. It gives all life purpose and makes all of the time we have so much more meaningful. Mephi's solution is just to travel from planet to planet and simply put an end to their misery before the natural end of the universe can do it itself, and so they feed it to Ghidorah so it can become a part of him, fuel him, and because Ghidorah lives on as infinite energy beyond our universe, so will part of you. Part of you will live as an energy inside of Ghidorah himself, fueling him. It's their eternal purpose. Ghidorah was discovered in his higher dimension, and the Exif summoned him to their planet to end their planet for them, and he did. Ghidorah spared a few Exif to travel throughout the galaxy as his heralds. It's kind of like this movie in a way is Godzilla versus Galactus, except Galactus is a lot scarier. Mephi's then reveals he's actually replaced his eye with the Garbatrium crystal he had repaired in the last movie. Another reason he couldn't do this before now is because he needed that crystal to be repaired. And it hypnotizes Haruo and sends him into a trance where Mephi's uses his telepathy to get inside of Haruo's brain and explains to him that because the universe will end, and there's no eternity in this dimension, the only way for life to have a full purpose and to make sure each life force can achieve a form of immortality is to fuel a creature like Ghidorah, who exists beyond time and space and beyond the universe. This is how Mephies plans to continue the survival of the species, not in literally keeping them alive, but in at least keeping a part of them alive, a speck of them alive. Mephies is trying to sell Haruo on this and the fact that it's actually a good thing. It puts an end to all suffering. It's actually pretty cool. You should do it. You should really do it, Haruo. You should say that Ghidorah is so great, Haruo. You should really say that about right now because we need you to. As Ghidorah offers instant relief from fear and pain and grants a vessel for life essence to live on. All Haruo has to do is embrace Ghidorah, offering his soul to Ghidorah, and Ghidorah will have full access to this dimension and devour Godzilla, because Ghidorah does not have full access to this dimension. He can only peer into it, but he cannot act under his own free will. He has to have someone guiding him, as he kind of, in a way, it's like he's again interacting with shadows and doesn't know where to aim. He needs Mephies to aim him. Mephies can look into the shadow and see the depth in it. Ghidorah can't. And Ghidorah would be able to take his full final form. Godzilla somehow, again, this is maybe one of the only other things that I kind of view as a writing mistake in this movie. Godzilla powers into his Scarlet Godzilla form, except that he doesn't have the electromagnetic waves going crazy inside of him or the EMP causing him to go off balance. So I don't know how he's able to channel that much electromagnetism inside of him to be able to heat up like he does, but he does power up into Scarlet Godzilla Earth form. They believe that this might give him a good chance though, because Godzilla can just use the heat to indirectly burn Ghidorah out without actually having to touch him. But Ghidorah's not actually in our dimension. It doesn't do anything at all. And Ghidorah just sucks the heat right out of Godzilla, returning him to normal and actually below freezing. They then start to realize Godzilla's literally vanishing from existence. Ghidorah is basically taking him out of existence, and this is what triggers the realization for Martin. Meanwhile, Mephies takes Haruo through human history and his own personal trauma, reliving all of his worst moments and replacing and infiltrating his memories, replacing his grandpa in his memories. It's so twisted the way that Mephies is still grooming him and messing with his own real memories to further enforce that grooming, to be like, actually, all your memories are the way I want them to be. Meanwhile, Martin realizes that Ghidorah is transplanting Godzilla into a different dimension. He's taking all of Godzilla's energy into the dimension he's a part of, and Ghidorah is not even a part of this universe. He then realizes that the only way Ghidorah can be interacting with our universe to the degree he is if somebody is guiding him. Meanwhile, Haruo is confronted by all the victims of Godzilla and his friends, who beg for Haruo to sacrifice his life to Ghidorah. Ghidorah powers up in the real world, lifting Godzilla off the ground and into the air, as Martin figures out that Mephies is Ghidorah's anchor, guiding his every move. To get that message to Haruo, Mina takes Martin to Mothra's egg, as it is a telepathic amplifier, which is something we learned in the last movie. Mothra is the one with the telepathic abilities, and she passed those on to the Hautua. I love this use of Mothra. She could do more. I would love if the silhouette of Mothra battled the silhouette of Ghidorah. I would love that. That would be so awesome to have a metaphysical battle going on in the mind space. Meanwhile, a physical battle is going on between Godzilla and King Ghidorah. That would be so freaking cool. I would love that, but unfortunately, they don't go all the way there, but they do go a little there. I used to think that we were seeing the destruction of Hiroshima itself. Hiroshima had a very specific bombing target. It was this kind of crossed river. That is not what we see here. We do see a river, and it's clearly imagery that's meant to be evocative of the bombing of Hiroshima, but the bombing we see in this movie is not actually Hiroshima getting bombed. We don't see the actual bombing occur. It certainly doesn't look like Nagasaki, because Nagasaki is much more on the waterfront, so it doesn't really look like that to me either. But as we see the city getting bombed by an atomic bomb, clearly just a reference to humanity's biggest mistake they've ever made, the worst thing they've ever done. Mina and Martin send Mothra's spirit to save Haruo. It's so cool. She flies past the bomber they're in and destroys it, freeing Haruo, dropping him out of the air so that Mina can show up and grab him, delivering Martin's message. And it's there that Haruo discovers that Mephies is the one who planned all of this. In fact, Mephies is not only the one controlling Ghidorah right now, but he's the one who put a bomb on the ship that was going to Taui at the start of this trilogy, bombing the ship to Taui in order to set all of this in motion. Now, I used to wonder, like, why would he do that? I guess just to upset Haruo, but the point is, I believe Taui might have been a planet hospitable for humans. He could not let humans go to a new planet. It would take way too long for them to develop to the point where they can create another Godzilla worthy of having Ghidorah feed on it, and so instead of waiting, he decides to do everything he can to get humanity back to Earth by bombing the ship to Taui to make it look inhospitable so that they leave. Ghidorah then replaces Godzilla in Haruo's memories, as Ghidorah has officially entered those memories as well. Super cool, I love that. But one single stray memory, and I wish it was Mothra who sent this stray memory to Haruo, one single stray memory of the flower locket that Haruo Haruo had originally left behind that was given to him by his parents, symbolizing that spring will always follow even the worst of winters and that life will always renew. This memory of his parents and hope and humanity, it breaks Mephies' control, and Haruo rejects him. He rejects the whole message. He rejects the whole idea that the only purpose of life is to give yourself to the afterlife, and instead embraces the idea that it's the fact that humans don't live forever that gives them their beauty and their value. Breaking through this, he literally breaks through the crystal eye of Mephies and doesn't stop there. He actually digs both of Mephies' eye out with his thumbs. Pretty brutal, but we only see the one crystal eye get destroyed. And in return, Ghidorah's interdimensional tether is severed to this world, leaving Ghidorah stranded on Earth, bound to Earth's physics. Godzilla then finally gets to take revenge. Godzilla tail strikes one of the heads out of the portal it was attached to, breaking its connection to that portal, and so it dies. It blows up on the ground. He snaps the jaw off King Kong style of the next head, very cool, and then finally atomic breaths the last head. It tries to catch the beam again, but man, he's too strong. Busts through Ghidorah, hits the singularity and explodes it, and Godzilla doesn't stop there as he destroys all the singularities. I want to draw some attention back to Takayuki Hattori's soundtrack here. The song playing Farewell is so well written, man. It first of all starts out with this very beautiful, elegant version of the Mephies Exif Ghidorah theme. It's kind of a peaceful ending for Ghidorah, as the scene itself is overall pretty peaceful, and then as Godzilla officially banishes Ghidorah back to the dimension from which he came, blowing up the portals in the sky, officially getting Ghidorah out of this world, saving the Earth, we hear Haruo's theme. In fact, if you go back and listen to the soundtrack, we haven't heard Godzilla's theme play where he's presented as monstrous since early in the movie. It's been early in the movie, before the threat of Ghidorah presents itself, that Godzilla was still seen as monstrous. And after Ghidorah's presence is known and we realize there truly are worse things out there than Godzilla and he's not all that bad and we've just been perceiving him wrong this whole time, they drop Godzilla's villainous theme and now he takes on Haruo's theme. A very peaceful version of Haruo's theme plays here as Godzilla and Haruo have kind of united in the goal of saving the planet. It's great. I love it. During this, Martin and the humans even wind up cheering for Godzilla and rooting for him in taking down Ghidorah. They have been won over by Godzilla as well. Mephies then warns Haruo in his final moments that his rage is so strong that it's blinding. It's blinding to a blind man. It burns so bright that as long as Haruo lives, Ghidorah will be watching him. Basically, Haruo's pride and rage is so powerful that since Ghidorah is now aware of him, Ghidorah knows where he is and can always see Earth. And in a way, I think the idea is that Haruo has the power at any moment to summon Ghidorah into this planet by committing himself to Ghidorah, regardless of the fact that the crystal's now broken. Ghidorah doesn't need the crystal. The crystal was how Mephies could allow Ghidorah into this world and aim him without actually letting him in through Haruo. But if Haruo wants, I do believe at any moment he could bring Ghidorah into this world to kill Godzilla, and that's another thing Haruo fears about himself, and that's another reason he has to go, because he knows deep down he might do it someday. Ghidorah will always be watching and waiting. Haruo then holds Mephies and cries, sobs as Mephies dies, as Mephies was, in a sense, his father figure. And so despite the fact that this guy is pure evil and the worst guy in the galaxy and a terrible person and the most evil, despicable person we've ever seen in a Godzilla movie, Haruo still can't help but weep for the loss of his friend and family. It's so tragic, man. What isn't tragic is that XAI kicks on in a song that I think is translated as Evergreen. This song plays as we see humanity heals, nature heals. Over the next few months, they are nothing but prosperous. The surviving humans, which there's a lot more than I was led to believe, there's just a ton of them show up out of nowhere. The surviving humans throw away their weapons and their spacesuits and live peacefully with the Hautua. They integrate into their lives and life blossoms, literally. Plants grow, flowers bloom, things are good. Haruo and Mina, I believe, get married, but Mina is certainly pregnant with Haruo's child, and they're in love. And this happiness ends abruptly as Martin reveals that, yeah, he's still kind of got some of that human arrogance and definitely that human pride deep within him as he restores the vulture and it's active again. Turns out he can also restore its propagation and rebuild all of the societies that have come before. Anything that the nanometal has scanned, it can rebuild, including Mechagodzilla. It can kill Godzilla. It can rebuild Mechagodzilla City. They can do it this time. And here he finds out that it was through the living nanometal on Yuko that Martin Martin took to restore the vulture. Pretty brutal. That's pretty messed up. Using it, he plans to rebuild everything. And with it, Haruo realizes they'll have a way to defeat Godzilla and in the process birth a totally new monster. Maybe not Mechagodzilla, but something completely different. Haruo then receives a vision from Mephies and Ghidorah that things are turning out quite nicely. Everything's going to be restored just like they thought, and humans can't help themselves, but if given the tools, follow their egos to the bitter end and destroy the planet. Despite all of the humans actually liking their new lives, the second they're presented with the ability to rebuild the old ways, they're all on board. They're all like, yeah, this is going to be great. I can't wait for Martin to do this. Even though, again, they like their new lives. They don't even want them to end. They like living with the Hautua. And I want to note here, Haruo was shown to be the only human who never fully adapted into the peaceful lives of the Hautua. He's the only one who still wears the remnants of his uniform. He still wears half of his spacesuit. He never adapted and he never can. That's the whole point of his character. He can never move on. Without saying even goodbye to his wife, Mina, Haruo just gets up and leaves. Miana follows him again. It should have been Mina who follows him, or I actually believe it should have been Miana, but Miana's the one who's pregnant here. Should have followed him. But it should have been the one that's carrying his baby. Should have followed him. Miana follows Haruo and discovers him grabbing Yuko's body. Haruo then asks her if Miana is scared of Godzilla and if she hates him. She says that yeah, she is scared of Godzilla, like she's scared of a tornado or any other force of nature. But no, she does not hate Godzilla, and in fact, the Hautua don't even have a concept for the idea of hate until Haruo showed up and taught it to them. And knowing his influence on Yuko and where that led her, and knowing where he's led most of humanity, and knowing that he himself can never move on, and that the human spirit will never move on from the desire to conquer, he decides to take it into his own hands to take away the ability to. Humans will never have the ability to conquer again, and in fact, as we've seen already, if you take away the ability to, they never want to. They just live content with the world they're a part of. Knowing all of this, and knowing that his presence will inspire others to go back to the old ways, as it did on the Artrum, and knowing that he will teach hate to the Hautua and inspire a desire to kill Godzilla, like he did with Yuko and with humanity, and that eventually, if humanity is able to defeat Godzilla, a new Godzilla, a worse Godzilla will be born, like what happened with the Bilisaludo, or knowing that he himself at any moment can give in to that religious urge and summon Ghidorah, and that maybe they can find a way to do the same, as the nanometal could also repair the Garbatrium crystal. Haruo decides to take away all of those options, get them all off the table, and let humanity live peacefully by themselves. He takes Yuko's body and the vulture to rid the world of the nanometal and the hate that once consumed it, and as the vulture activates, Godzilla awakens, sensing that there is an active threat to him and nature's balance, and as Haruo pleads for Godzilla to end his suffering, humanity's hatred, and end the last person carrying all of the stolen dreams of the past, Godzilla does so, shooting down the vulture as it explodes against him. In the end of the movie, the spring flowers live on, and so does Haruo, in the form of his son. The post-credit scene is set at some point many years in the future, where we see the Hautua living completely peacefully. They are worshipping at an altar shaped like the vulture, and they worship Haruo's sacrifice. They call him the Vengeful One, as his vengeance consumed him, but in the end he ridded the world of vengeance in the process. They wish away all of the things that scare them, and Godzilla is not one of those things. There is peace and coexistence at last. The human story of Godzilla the Planet Eater, I think it's so freaking strong. As you can tell, I've been gushing about it this whole review. I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastically written. Mephies is amazing. He's my favorite villain of the Godzilla series. Haruo's journey is tragic and gripping, and I also think it's incredibly well written. Well, I can understand why people are critical of the ending, essentially suggesting that the world's better off with Haruo dead. You know, that's a Japanese trope. There's a lot of Japanese media that suggests the world's better off with the hero dead. The idea of the self-sacrificing, depressed Japanese hero goes back way into traditional Japanese folklore, and is nothing new to the Godzilla series, as it all starts with Dr. Serizawa sacrificing himself to save humanity from his own invention. It's all right there already. I think it's all great. I love the human story of this movie, and it retroactively made me appreciate the human story of the other films so much more, especially Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, with all of the very well integrated setup and foreshadowing for this movie and the twist with Mephies. I think it's all right there. It's all great. It's a very well thought out trilogy. The kaiju story is the best of the trilogy by far. Godzilla gets the most to do here. He's awesome to see. They actually get us to root for Godzilla despite the fact that he's been the enemy the previous two films. Void Ghidorah is fantastic. I love the way he moves. I love the way he swims. All of the way he interacts with the environment, the way that the sensors can't pick up with him, the way that the lightning comes off of him. I love everything except I just don't know if I understand the design choice personally, but I appreciate how it was used. It's used in a great way. The way he coils around Godzilla as this infinitely long and terrifying being that we can't perceive is great. I wish we could have gotten one sequence where Ghidorah takes his full form, but other than that, it's all great. I love it. Ghidorah really plays into the cosmic horror vibes that we've never really gotten to explore with that character before. The visuals are much better here than they were before. We get rid of that really depressing color grade with the fog and the blue haze over the entire planet. The planet actually doesn't wind up foggy in this movie after Ghidorah is defeated. It winds up being looking very nice and hospitable again. The pinks and blues in this movie are very beautiful. That sunset scene or the sunrise scene at the end of the movie where Toho sacrifices himself is really, really great. It looks so beautiful. And the actual visuals are great with the travel through the past. I love revisiting scenes from the other movie. It's great that we can go into scenes from previous films in a way that you don't really get to do in live action sequels, but we get to travel into previous movies and into previous scenes and interact with and affect them. It's really great. The animation's still not my favorite. I think the animation is what holds this trilogy back overall. If it was better animated, if it had some 2D Evangelion at its peak level animation, this would be a fantastic trilogy, but the animation still does kind of hold it back a little bit. The music is very strong, some of the best of the entire trilogy. I gotta shout out the fact that my favorite song in the entire trilogy plays here, and that's the first half of Attack That Consumes the Earth. The second half with the jump scare is not as good as that first half. Ruin and Salvation's fantastic. Farewell's great. The last one is great. And also, this movie's got the best XAI song with Live and Die. That's the best one they wrote for any of these movies. It's the only one that feels like it truly nails the theme and tone of the film that came before it. You know, I feel like Whiteout is really out of nowhere. I feel like Whiteout does not fit the tone of that first movie. The Sky Falls is okay, but Live and Die is really, really great. I think that's the best one. Evergreen's alright. It does fit the scene it plays, but I will say the visuals on that montage are really weird. I don't know why we go to that like weird painting-esque visual where it's like poorly animated, like nothing really moves right. That's not my favorite. That's not my favorite sequence for sure. But overall, I think that the movie's great. I really like it. It really has stuck with me over the years. I love that it does new things. It's one of the Godzilla movies I've thought about the most since it first came out. It's one of the ones that's really stuck with me, and I think it's really a shame that people don't give this trilogy more love overall, as the whole trilogy's generally really well written. It's underwhelming. It doesn't live up to the spectacle that we all hoped for, and certainly not with the amount of kaiju that were promised to be in Godzilla Monster Planet, only for them to all appear in Godzilla Monster Apocalypse, a prequel novel, not even a manga. I can understand the disappointment, but I think as is, the trilogy we got is actually very strong and deserves a lot more love than it gets, and I hope my reviews have been able to help enlighten some people into why I love these movies and why I will always defend these films as being really, really well written, interesting Godzilla movies, and why I like them so much. Also, this is the end of a freaking era, man. Before I give Godzilla the Planet Eater a rating, I just gotta say, this is it. I just finished off the last page of my Godzilla-Thon notebook that I take all my notes. I handwrite my notes for these movies. I just finished off the notebook. It was a notebook that has served with me since freshman year in high school. It was originally my government notebook, but I used it so barely in government. I only had to tear a couple pages out to move on to Godzilla-Thon. And starting my sophomore year of high school, I started reviewing Godzilla-Thon using this notebook, and it has served with me until now. We're 8 years in, or I think 8 years in since I started Godzilla-Thon. 8 years later, I just finished off the original Godzilla-Thon notebook. I'll have to start a second one for the next era, which fittingly begins with Godzilla King of the Monsters. I think that's going to be fun. We just ended the anime trilogy. We ended my Godzilla notebook, and this is the last Godzilla-Thon title card I did the artwork for. I did the artwork for this all the way back in 2019, in May of 2019, when I was going to reboot Godzilla-Thon. I did the artwork for this. This is the last artwork I ever did for Godzilla-Thon. I did all the Kong-a-thon artwork after this, I believe. So technically, the Kong Skull Island review of Kong-a-thon is the last artwork I ever produced for any of these reviews. But from here, I will have a thumbnail artist working with me who has produced the thumbnail art for the reviews moving forward. So it really is the end of an era in so many regards. Thank you guys all for sticking with Godzilla-Thon. I give Godzilla the Planet Eater a very solid 8.5 out of 10. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. Do I think it's perfect? No. I think the visuals kind of hold it down. The pacing of the monster's movements hold it down. The underwhelming fight holds it down, but on the whole, the ideas, the writing, the premise, it's so strong. The core themes and allegory being explored are so well done. Godzilla the Planet Eater is a solid 8.5 out of 10. I love this movie. I will continue to sing the praises of this movie for years, and I hope my review helped you guys see why. Thank you guys all for watching. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. And if that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man, out.